The morning I found my bakery empty, I stood in shock. Everything was gone. Big mixers, special ovens, even the wooden rolling pins my grandmother had given me. But the worst part, my recipe book was missing. It wasn't just a book. It held my family's secret recipes, passed down for 3 generations. My name is Sophie Chin. I'm 32 years old, and I was watching my husband destroy everything I had worked for. Looking for something? James's voice echoed in the empty kitchen. He stood in the doorway, holding my grandmother's recipe book. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this?" He smiled, the same charming smile that had fooled me 5 years ago. "Business, darling. Your bakery was doing so well, I thought, why not expand? But there can only be one top bakery in this neighborhood. I should have seen the signs. The late-night calls, the secret meetings, how he suddenly cared about my bakery after ignoring it for years. But I trusted him. I never thought he would do something like this." "Those recipes are my family's legacy," I said as he flipped through the pages carelessly. James laughed. "Legacy doesn't pay the bills. But these recipes? They'll make me rich. James Artisan Bakery opens next week, right across the street." I glanced out the window. The new sign was already up, his name shining in gold letters. "You're using my family's recipes to compete with me." "Compete?" He smirked. "There won't be any competition. I took everything, your equipment, your suppliers, even your head baker, Mike. Face it, Sophie, you're finished." What James didn't know. I had expected something like this. Not exactly this. I trusted him too much to think he'd go this far. But my grandmother had taught me well. The book he stole, it wasn't the real one. "If that's how you want to play this," I said calmly, "then good luck with your bakery." He frowned, surprised by my reaction. "That's it? No tears? No begging? Would it change anything?" "No," he admitted, tucking the book under his arm. "This is business, Sophie. You're just not cut out for it." Before leaving, he added, "Oh, and I filed for divorce. The papers should arrive today. You can keep this place, though. Not that you'll have much use for an empty bakery." I waited until he was gone. Then I picked up my phone and called my grandmother in Taiwan. "Ma," I said in Mandarin, "it happened, just like you warned me." She was silent for a moment. Then she chuckled, her laugh like wind chimes. "He took the fake book." "Yes, and everything else. The equipment, the staff, even our suppliers." "Good. Let him have the simple recipes. The real ones are safe with us." I smiled, remembering how she taught me to protect family secrets. The book James stole had basic recipes, good but not the best. The real ones, those were never written down. "Are you ready?" Amma asked. "Once you start this, there's no turning back." I looked around my empty bakery. I thought about James's smug face, how sure he was that he had destroyed me. "I'm ready." "Good. Check your email. I sent you the first real recipes, the ones your grandfather used to build our first bakery in Taiwan. The ones that made people line up every morning." My phone pinged with an email. "What are the rest?" I asked. "One step at a time," she said. "Prove you can master these first." I opened my laptop. The recipes were in traditional Chinese characters, full of notes and special techniques. The first one was for our family's famous egg custard tarts. Not the easy version in James's stolen book, the real one. The one that made my great-grandfather's bakery famous. I ran my fingers over the screen, tracing the words. James thought he had taken everything. But he didn't understand what truly made a bakery great. It wasn't the equipment. It wasn't the staff. It wasn't even the recipes on paper. It was the knowledge passed down through generations. The skills that couldn't be stolen. The secrets that lived in my hands and heart. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from Mike, my old head baker. "Mike? Sophie, I'm sorry. James offered double my salary. I have kids to think about." I understood. James had money, family money he never earned but used like a weapon. He could steal everything. But he could never steal what truly mattered. What James couldn't steal was the heart of our baking, the thing that made it special. That afternoon, the divorce papers arrived. James had thought of everything. He wanted a clean break, offering me money that seemed fair on paper but was only a small part of what the bakery was really worth. I signed without a fight. Let him think he had won. That evening, I went to a local restaurant supply store. The owner, Mr. Wong, had known my grandmother when she first came to America. "I heard what happened," he said. That husband of yours, taking everything. I nodded and handed him a list. I need to start over, just the basics for now. He looked at my list, then at me. Your grandmother called. She told me to give you whatever you need. No rush on payment. Mr. Wong, I can't. He raised a hand to stop me. Your grandmother once helped my parents when they first came to America. She said it was to repay kindness shown to her family in Taiwan. Now it's my turn to help you. Take what you need. Pay me when you can. By midnight, my kitchen had a new mixer, a second-hand oven, and basic supplies. It wasn't the expensive equipment James had taken, but it was enough. I worked all night, carefully following my grandmother's instructions for the egg custard tarts. The first batch wasn't perfect. These recipes required skill and precision. But by sunrise, they were close to the ones I remember from my childhood. James's bakery would open in a week. He had my equipment, my staff, and a book of simple recipes he thought would bring him success. But he didn't have what truly mattered: the generations of knowledge, the skills that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary, and most of all, the determination of someone who refused to give up. Let him think he had won, because I was just getting started. I had something better than stolen recipes. I had my grandmother's wisdom, my family's real secrets, and a plan that no fancy equipment could beat. The morning James's bakery opened, I watched from my empty storefront as crowds lined up outside his shop. He had advertised aggressively, calling himself the new premium bakery in town. People were eager to try what he promised were traditional recipes with a modern twist. I spent that day in my kitchen, perfecting my grandmother's egg custard tarts. By evening, they had become something extraordinary. Pastry so delicate it crumbled at the touch. Custard so smooth it melted on the tongue. Not just good, but unforgettable. These are perfect, Mr. Wong said, tasting one as he dropped off more supplies. Almost, I corrected. I'm still learning. For weeks, I worked in silence while James's bakery stayed busy. My grandmother sent me new recipes, each one with careful instructions and long phone calls filled with wisdom. Then I saw the first cracks in James's success. One morning, outside his bakery, I spotted Mike, my former head baker, arguing with him. These aren't working, Mike said, holding my old recipes. The measurements are right, but something's missing. Customers are complaining. James waved his hands, clearly frustrated. He had my recipes, but the results weren't what he expected. That's when I made my move. I took a box of my perfectly baked parts to Mrs. Lee's tea shop, 2 blocks away. She had been a regular at my bakery before James took over. Sophie, she said, hugging me. We've missed you. That new place, it's just not the same. Would you like to sell these? I asked, opening the box. Exclusively in your shop? She took a bite and her eyes widened. These are even better than before. How much? Let's start small, 1 dozen every morning. Word spread fast. Soon, people lined up at Mrs. Lee's before she even opened, hoping to get one of my tarts before they sold out. I added another tea shop, then a third, each with its own exclusive treat from my grandmother's real recipes. 6 months later, James's bakery was struggling. The excitement had faded. People realized his pastries, while decent, weren't special. His stolen recipes weren't enough. That's when my grandmother sent the next set of recipes, the ones for our family's famous mooncakes. Perfect timing, she said on our nightly call. Mid-Autumn Festival is coming. These were your great-grandfather's pride. I spent weeks practicing, learning every small detail that made our mooncakes different. The balance of flavors, the precise ingredients, the golden crust. When the festival arrived, my mooncakes were everywhere, sold at the best tea shops and restaurants in the city. People couldn't stop talking about them. James noticed. He had to. His bakery was losing customers, and his stolen recipes weren't bringing them back. One evening, he showed up at my door, still in his chef's coat. How are you doing this? He demanded. I have your recipes. I have better equipment. I have everything that made your bakery successful. I wiped flour from my hands and looked at him. Do you? I asked. Or do you just have a piece of paper with measurements? Because baking isn't just about following instructions. It's about knowledge passed down through generations. And that's something you can't steal. His face turned red. You changed the recipes before I took them. That's it, isn't it? I smiled. No, James, you just never got the real ones. The ones you took, they're fine. They'll make decent pastries, but they'll never be special. This isn't over, he said angrily. Actually, it is, I replied. Check your sales. Check your reviews. People can tell the difference between something real and something copied. Over the next year, I grew my business, slowly, carefully. Each recipe my grandmother sent became a signature item at a different shop. No big bakery, no flashy ads. Just quality, tradition, and the knowledge that real success can't be stolen. James tried everything to compete. He hired new bakers, bought even fancier equipment, and ran big promotions. But no matter what he did, he couldn't make his bakery special. He didn't have the generations of knowledge behind the recipes. 18 months after taking my bakery, James's business was failing. I heard he was trying to sell it, but no one wanted a struggling bakery with bad reviews. That's when my grandmother called. It's time, she said. You're ready for the last set of recipes, the most special ones. When she arrived, she carried a small, old notebook, the real family recipe book passed down for generations. Inside were the recipes that had made our family's bakery in Taiwan famous. Your great-grandfather started with nothing, she told me as we sat in my kitchen. Just knowledge and determination. Sometimes, losing everything helps you build something even stronger. For 2 weeks, she taught me the final techniques, sharing stories of our family's history. Each recipe came with a lesson, a piece of wisdom passed down through generations. The day she left, she hugged me tight. You've built something beautiful, Sophie, not just a business, but a legacy. A month later, I got an email from James's lawyer. James wanted to sell me his bakery, everything including the equipment for a low price. His business was failing, and he needed a way out. I thought about the day he had taken everything from me, so confident that my bakery's success would be his. Now he was trying to sell it all back. My answer was simple: no, thank you. I had built something better. My business had grown into a network of specialty shops across the city, each one selling pastries made from my family's real recipes. People traveled from other states to buy my mooncakes during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Food magazines wrote about my traditional pastries, calling them the best in the city. 6 months later, James's bakery closed for good. I watched as he took down his sign, remembering how he had once told me there was only room for one premium bakery in the neighborhood. He had been right. That day, I stood in my own kitchen, now fully stocked with tools I had bought myself, and baked a fresh batch of egg custard tarts. As their warm, familiar scent filled the air, I thought about everything I had overcome. James had taken my equipment, my staff, and a book of recipes he thought would make him successful. But he never understood what really mattered: the knowledge passed down through generations, the skills that couldn't be stolen, and the strength that comes from rebuilding. My phone buzzed with a message from my grandmother. Ready for the next chapter. I looked at the lines of customers outside my partner shops, waiting for something real, something made with care, something special. I smiled and typed back, ready. Because losing everything hadn't ended my dream. It had made me unstoppable.
The first time my husband laughed at my writing dreams, I should have known. But love makes you blind, and success makes the best revenge. My name is Kaya, and I've spent the last decade pretending my passion for writing was just a cute hobby. I run our family bookstore with my father, surrounded by other people's stories, while mine gathered dust in hidden folders on my laptop. That was until 6 months ago. Still working on that little book of yours? Brian's voice dripped with amusement as he walked into our home office, loosening his tie after another successful day at his marketing firm. I quickly minimized the document on my screen. Not fast enough. It's actually finished, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was thinking of sending it to some agents. He leaned against my desk, picking up the framed photo of us from our wedding day. Honey, do you know how many people try to get published every year? Maybe stick to what you're good at. The bookstore's doing great under your management. I forced a smile, the kind that had become my specialty. You're probably right. That night, after Bryant fell asleep, I sat in our bathroom with my laptop, reading through my manuscript one last time. My sister Zoe had been pushing me to submit it for months. What's the worst that could happen? She'd said over coffee last week. They say no, at least you tried. I created a new email address under the pen name Alexandra Rivers and sent my manuscript to 5 literary agents. Then I deleted the sent emails and cleared my browser history. 3 weeks later, Rachel Benson called. "Is this Alexandra Rivers?" she asked when I answered my cell phone during my lunch break at the bookstore. My heart stopped. "Yes?" "I couldn't put your manuscript down. The character development, the plot twists. It's exactly what we're looking for. When can we meet?" I glanced through the store's window at my father, Abraham, helping a customer. "I actually prefer to communicate via email. I'm very private about my writing." Rachel paused. "That's unusual, but we can work with it. Are you willing to do virtual meetings?" And just like that, my secret career began. I wrote under the cover of darkness, edited during quiet moments at the store, and conducted all business through carefully scheduled video calls from my car during grocery runs. The book took off faster than anyone expected. By month 4, it was climbing bestseller lists. My father started stocking multiple copies in the store's front window. "Have you read this new author, Alexandra Rivers?" he asked me one morning, straightening the display. "Everyone's talking about her. Mysterious too. No photos, no social media presence." I pretended to examine the cover. Maybe she just wants her work to speak for itself. Bryant came home that evening, clutching a copy of my book. My stomach lurched. "Look what everyone at work is raving about," he said, tossing it onto the kitchen counter. "Apparently, it's the next big thing. The author's some recluse though, probably ugly or weird." I stirred the pasta sauce harder than necessary. Maybe she just values her privacy. Who wouldn't want recognition for their work? He shook his head. "That's the whole point of success. Getting your name out there, being somebody." I watched him walk away, my hands trembling slightly. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with another email from Rachel about upcoming promotional opportunities. The irony wasn't lost on me. That weekend, Dustin, our longtime friend and local writing group organizer, stopped by the bookstore. He caught my eye and held up my book. His knowing smile made my chest tight. "Quite an achievement," he whispered, when no one was within earshot. "Your secret's safe with me, but you should be proud." I shushed him, glancing around nervously. "How did you know?" "Please, I've been reading your writing for years in group. I'd recognize your voice anywhere." He squeezed my arm. "You deserve this, Kaya." Later that night, Bryant was reading in bed, my book, of all things. "This is actually really good," he mused. "The way the main character handles betrayal, it's powerful stuff." I turned away, fighting back a bitter laugh. If he only knew how much of our life I'd woven into those pages, how many of his dismissive comments had fueled my late-night writing sessions. My phone lit up with a notification. Rachel's email subject line made my blood run cold. "National Literature Awards nomination." I closed my eyes, remembering all the times Bryant had patted my head and called my writing cute. All the times his mother Sylvia had suggested I focus on real work instead of scribbling stories. The satisfaction of secret success was sweet, but something inside me knew this couldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the truth would have to come out. I just didn't know then how spectacular and devastating that revelation would be. The manuscript sat in plain sight on my desk, mocking me. I'd gotten careless, leaving printouts of early drafts scattered among my other papers. That's how everything started to unravel. "What's this?" Bryant's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway of our home office, holding pages of my novel. The real one, not the published version. "Just some writing exercises," I said, trying to keep my voice casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. He flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing. "These scenes, they're exactly like that Alexandra Rivers book. I was practicing by copying passages I liked." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth. Lots of writers do that. Bryant set the pages down, but something had changed in his expression. That night, I shredded every draft I could find and deleted files from my laptop. But the damage was done. I could feel it in the way he watched me, in his sudden interest in my writing habits. A week later, we attended a local literary event where my book was being discussed. Bryant insisted on coming, claiming he wanted to support my bookstore's involvement. The symbolism in Chapter 3 is particularly striking, one reader said during the discussion. The way the protagonist confronts her fears through that metaphor with the locked door. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, remembering writing that scene at 3 a.m. after another one of Bryant's dismissive comments about my hobby. "What do you think, honey?" Bryant squeezed my hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You've read it, right?" "It's interesting," I managed. Later that evening, Zoe called. "Have you seen Bryant's social media post?" I hadn't. I pulled it up and felt my stomach drop. There was a photo of him in our home office, surrounded by books, looking pensively at his laptop. The caption read, "Sometimes the biggest stories take time to tell. Can't wait to share some exciting news." "What is he doing?" Zoe's voice was sharp with concern. "I don't know," I whispered. But deep down, I did. The next morning, Rachel called during my usual grocery store hiding spot. "Alexandra, there's been an interesting development. A man named Bryant Shepard contacted our office, claiming to be you." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "What?" "He has some convincing evidence, early drafts, notes, even a detailed outline of the plot. He says he used a female pen name to make the story more marketable." I couldn't breathe. "And you believed him?" "We're not sure what to believe. But with the National Literature Awards coming up, we need to sort this out quickly." That evening, Bryant was practically glowing when he came home. "Guess who's been nominated for a major award?" I stood in our kitchen, clutching a dish towel like a lifeline. "What did you do?" "What I had to." He stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Think about it, Kaya. Who would believe you anyway? You've never published anything. I have connections, credibility." "It's my book," I whispered. "Is it? Where's your proof? All those drafts you shredded, those files you deleted." He touched my cheek, and I flinched. "This is better for both of us. I can make this book even bigger than it is. We'll both benefit." I jerked away from him. "You can't do this." "I already have." He pulled out an invitation from his pocket. "The awards ceremony is next month. They're expecting both of us, the brilliant author and his supportive wife." I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my whole body shaking. When I could breathe again, I called Zoe. "I'll kill him," she said immediately. "No." I wiped my face. "I need to think." "What's to think about?" "Tell everyone the truth." But it wasn't that simple. Bryant was right. I had no proof. I'd been so careful hiding my identity that I destroyed any evidence of my authorship. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Bryant did interviews, charming everyone with his humble storyteller persona. His mother, Sylvia, called constantly, gushing about her son's hidden talent. Even my father was impressed. "Who would have thought?" Abraham said one day at the store. "Bryant, an author. No wonder he always supported you running the bookstore." I escaped to the storage room and called Dustin. "People are starting to believe him," I said, my voice breaking. "Then stop him," Dustin replied firmly. "I've got copies of your early drafts from writing group, dated, with my comments. Would that help?" I closed my eyes, thinking of the awards ceremony ahead. "Keep them safe. I might need them soon." That night, Bryant practiced his acceptance speech in front of our bedroom mirror. "This story came from a place of deep personal truth," he rehearsed, without a hint of irony. I watched him from the doorway, something hardening inside me. He caught my eye in the reflection and smiled. That same patronizing smile he'd given me for years when I talked about writing. The time for hiding was over. I had a speech of my own to prepare. "You'll never guess who's coming to the ceremony," Bryant announced over breakfast, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Mom and Dad, of course, and I invited your father too." He was so excited. The toast in my mouth turned to ash. "You invited our families." "Why not? It's a celebration." He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. "You should invite Zoe too. Make it a real family affair." I gripped my fork so hard it hurt. He was boxing me in, making it impossible to expose him without humiliating everyone we loved. Clever. Later that morning, Sylvia called while I was arranging books at the store. "Darling, we simply must go shopping for the ceremony. You'll need something appropriate for the wife of a literary genius. I'm pretty busy with the store." "Nonsense. I'll pick you up at 2. She hung up before I could protest. 3 hours later, I stood in an upscale boutique while Sylvia held up dresses. "This one's perfect, subtle, elegant, won't draw attention from Bryant." "Heaven forbid," I muttered. "What was that, dear?" "Nothing." I forced a smile. "It's beautiful." She pressed the dress into my arms. "You know, I always worried about Bryant settling down with someone so simple, but now I see you were exactly what he needed, a supportive wife who could give him space to develop his talents." I disappeared into the fitting room, pressing my forehead against the cool mirror. My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. "Just got Bryant's invitation. Please tell me you have a plan." I didn't respond. That evening, Rachel called during my now routine escape to the grocery store parking lot. "Alexandra, or whoever you are, this situation is unprecedented. Bryant's story about using a female pen name is gaining traction. The publicity is incredible." "He's lying," I said, my voice breaking. "Then prove it. Because right now, he's got a compelling narrative and evidence. What do you have?" I ended the call and sat there, watching families load groceries into their cars, living their normal lives. My phone buzzed again, Dustin this time. "I found more of your old drafts," he said when I answered. "And I have emails from our writing group discussions. It's not much, but keep them safe." I interrupted. "I'm not ready yet." Back home, Bryant was in his element, practicing his speech again. When I created this story, I poured my heart into every word. "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. He turned, raising an eyebrow. "Problem. How can you stand there and say those words? They're not yours." "They are now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And you're going to smile and support me, just like you always have. Because if you don't, you'll hurt everyone. Your father, my parents, our friends. Is that what you want?" I backed away. "You're a coward." "No, I'm smart. I saw an opportunity and took it. That's what winners do." He straightened his tie. "Now, about your dress for the ceremony." The next day at the bookstore, my father couldn't stop talking about Bryant's success. To think, all those hours he spent in his office. He was writing this masterpiece. I knocked over a stack of books. "Dad, please. Are you okay?" He helped me gather the fallen volumes. "You seem stressed lately." "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I was drowning. That afternoon, Zoe stormed into the store. "This has gone far enough." "Not here," I hissed, pulling her into the storage room. "He's giving interviews, Kaya. He's talking about scenes that you wrote about us, about our childhood. How can you let him steal your memories?" I slid down against a shelf of books. "What choice do I have? Tell the truth. Show them the proof." "What proof? Everything I have is circumstantial. He's got the drafts, the notes. He's got forgeries." She knelt beside me. "And you've got me. I remember every story you told me while writing this book, every late-night call about plot points, every tear you shed when Bryant dismissed your dreams." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. "The ceremony's in 3 days. Then we have 3 days to prepare." She squeezed my hand. "No more hiding." That night, Bryant hosted a small dinner party for his literary friends. I watched him hold court in our living room, describing his creative process with perfect conviction. "The character's journey really reflects my own struggles with identity and recognition," he said, and everyone nodded appreciatively. I excused myself and went upstairs to our bedroom. Opening my laptop, I began to write. Not a novel this time, but a different kind of story, the true story. My phone lit up with a text from Dustin. "Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back. We all do." I looked at my reflection in the window, hearing Bryant's laughter float up from downstairs. 3 days until the ceremony. 3 days until I either accepted this theft of my identity or fought back. The choice was becoming clearer with every stolen word that came out of my husband's mouth. The National Literature Awards ceremony buzzed with energy. Cameras flashed as Bryant guided me through the entrance, his hand pressed firmly against my lower back. The dress Sylvia chose felt like a straitjacket. "Smile," he whispered through his teeth. "Everyone's watching." They were. Literary critics, publishers, and authors filled the grand hall, all eager to meet the mysterious writer who'd captured readers' hearts. My heart, my words. "Bryant." Rachel approached us, elegant in a black evening gown. Her eyes flickered to me briefly. "And this must be your wife, Kaya, right?" I nodded, watching her search my face. Did she recognize my voice from our calls? "There's my boy." Sylvia's voice cut through the crowd. She and Bryant's father arrived, followed by my dad and Zoe. My sister's expression was thunderous. "Quite a turnout," Abraham said, beaming with pride. "Bryant, son, you've done us all proud." I excused myself to the bathroom, where I found Zoe waiting. "I brought what you asked for." She pulled a USB drive from her clutch. "Dustin's copies of your drafts, emails, everything." My hands shook as I took it. "I don't know if I can do this. Look at me." She gripped my shoulders. "That man out there is stealing your life's work, your voice, your story." "But Dad looks so happy." "Dad will be prouder knowing his daughter wrote that book, not his fraud of a son-in-law." The ceremony began. I sat between Bryant and my father, watching speakers praise the year's literary achievements. Bryant squeezed my hand when they announced the major awards category, and the National Literature Award goes to Bryant Shepard for Shadows of Silence. The room erupted in applause. Bryant stood, straightening his jacket. He kissed my cheek before heading to the stage. "I've dreamed of this moment," he began, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "This story came from the deepest part of my soul." I felt sick. These were my words. My soul he was laying bare. "The protagonist's journey reflects my own struggles with identity," he continued. "The scene where she confronts her past in her grandmother's attic, that was inspired by my own childhood." Beside me, Zoe made a small, angry sound. "That scene was about our grandmother, about the summer we spent sorting through her belongings after she died." "Writing has always been my secret passion," Bryant said, his voice breaking perfectly. "I chose a female pen name because I wanted the story to speak for itself, free from preconceptions." Rachel watched from the front row, her expression unreadable. Sylvia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "And finally, I want to thank my wonderful wife, Kaya." He gestured to me. "Her support made this possible." The spotlight found me. Hundreds of eyes turned in my direction. My father patted my hand proudly. Something snapped. I stood up. "Kaya!" Bryant's voice held a warning edge. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The room fell silent. "Honey, this isn't the time," Bryant started, but I was already climbing the steps. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying through his microphone, "this is exactly the time." Sylvia half rose from her seat. "Bryant, what is she doing?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out the USB drive. "I have something to share with everyone." "Kaya, don't." Bryant grabbed my arm, but I pulled away. "The scene in the grandmother's attic?" I turned to face the audience. That was my grandmother, my attic, my memory. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Rachel lean forward in her seat. "I can prove it." My voice grew stronger. "I have the original drafts, dated emails, witnesses from my writing group. I am Alexandra Rivers." The room erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed. People stood up. Bryant tried to grab the microphone, but I held firm. The protagonist's struggle with identity, that was mine. Every word, every scene, every emotion, they're all mine. "She's lying," Bryant said desperately. "She's just upset, emotional." "Read page 158. I challenged the audience. The scene where the main character finds her grandmother's old recipe box. Ask me what was in it. Ask me about the hidden letter beneath the snickerdoodle recipe. Ask me anything about this book, my book. Security approached the stage. Bryant smiled nervously at the crowd. My wife has been under a lot of stress lately. Check the USB drive, I said quickly. Compare the writing group drafts with the published version. Look at the timestamps, the email trails. That's enough. Bryant tried to lead me away, but I planted my feet. No, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I've had enough of being quiet. In the audience, my father stood frozen. Zoe was filming everything on her phone. Sylvia looked like she might faint. And there, in the front row, Rachel Benson pulled out her phone and started making calls. The truth was out. Now I just had to prove it. Security didn't remove me from the stage. Instead, Rachel's voice cut through the chaos. Let her speak. The audience settled into an uneasy quiet. Bryant's hand fell away from my arm. The proof is all here, I said, holding up the USB drive. But let me tell you something that isn't in any file. Let me tell you about the night I wrote the final chapter. Rachel nodded to a technician, who connected my drive to the presentation system. The screen behind me flickered to life. It was 3 a.m, I continued. I was sitting in our bathroom, because Bryant said my typing kept him awake. I wrote about a woman finding her voice, not knowing I was really writing about myself. The first document appeared on screen, my original draft, dated and time-stamped, with Dustin's comments in the margins. That's my writing group feedback, Dustin called out from the audience, standing up. I can verify every word. Bryant stepped forward. Those could be fabricated. Page 243, I cut him off. The recipe box scene. Tell them what was under the snickerdoodle recipe, Bryant. Tell them about the letter. He opened his mouth, then closed it. It was a love letter, I said, my voice breaking. From my grandmother to a man who wasn't my grandfather. A secret she took to her grave that only Zoe and I knew about. Want to know how I know? Because we found it together. Zoe stood up. The letter was dated June 15th, 1962. It was written on blue stationery with a torn corner. The man's name was Robert. Cameras flashed. Journalists typed frantically on their phones. But that's not all, I continued. The protagonist's fear of thunderstorms. That came from the night Zoe and I hid under our grandmother's quilt during a blackout. The description of the attic's smell, mothballs, and old leather, that's real. Every detail is memory, not imagination. Rachel approached the stage, holding her phone. I have every email exchange with Alexandra Rivers here. The writing style matches perfectly. The voice is identical. This is ridiculous. Sylvia stood up, her face flushed. Bryant would never. Ask him to explain any part of the writing process, I challenged. Ask him about the character arcs, the symbolism, the research. Ask him anything. Bryant's confident facade cracked. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The locked door metaphor in Chapter 3, called out a literary critic from the second row. What inspired that? Bryant stammered. Well, you see, the door represents. It was our first apartment, I interrupted. The door would stick in humid weather. You had to shoulder it open, just like the protagonist had, to force her way through her fears. You wouldn't know that, Bryant, because you were never there. You were too busy at the office. The audience murmured. More people stood up, phones recording. The proof is overwhelming, Rachel announced. The timestamps, the drafts, the consistent writing style in emails. Mr. Shepard, do you have anything to say in your defense? Bryant's shoulders slumped. For a moment, he looked smaller, vulnerable. Then his eyes hardened. You want the truth? His voice cracked. Fine. I found her manuscript. I read it. It was good. Better than good. But who was she? Nobody. Just a bookstore manager with a hobby. I could make it successful. I had the connections, the credibility. You had no right, I whispered. I made your book famous. He turned to me, desperate. Look what I did for it. The interviews, the publicity. You stole my voice, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You stole my memories, my grandmother's story, my childhood with Zoe. You stole everything that made this book real. My father stood up slowly. Bryant, how could you? Dad, Bryant turned to his father. Mom, I just wanted. But Sylvia had already turned away, her shoulders shaking. Security finally approached, but not for me. They escorted Bryant off the stage as Rachel took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of this evidence, the National Literature Awards Committee will need to reconvene. But I think it's clear who the real Alexandra Rivers is. The room erupted in applause. Journalists swarmed forward, calling my name, my real name. Through the chaos, I saw my father pushing through the crowd. Kaya, he reached for me, tears in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid, I said, letting him pull me into a hug. I didn't want to disappoint you. Disappoint me? My daughter wrote a bestseller. I've never been more proud. Zoe joined our hug, squeezing tight. Told you the truth would set you free. Over their shoulders, I watched Bryant being led away. He looked back once, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Defeat. Rachel touched my arm. We have a lot to discuss, Alexandra, or should I say, Kaya. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. Kaya, my name is Kaya, and I have more stories to tell. The aftermath exploded like a storm. Reporters camped outside our bookstore. My phone buzzed constantly, and social media erupted with hot takes and hashtags. But it was the quiet conversation in our living room that shook me most. I need to explain, Bryant said, sitting across from me. His tie was loose, dark circles under his eyes. 2 days had passed since the ceremony. There's nothing to explain. I started to stand, but Zoe put a hand on my shoulder. Let him talk, she said. You need to hear this. Bryant pulled out an old photograph, himself as a child, holding up a story he'd written. I was 8 here. Mom had it framed. Why are you showing me this? Because it was the last time she was proud of anything I created. His voice cracked. After this, everything I wrote was derivative, or shallow, or not up to the family standard. That doesn't excuse. No, it doesn't. He rubbed his face. But when I found your manuscript, God, Kaya, it was everything I'd ever wanted to write. Everything Mom always said I couldn't do. Zoe scoffed. So you stole it? I convinced myself I could do it justice, that I could give it the platform it deserved. He laughed bitterly. I sound pathetic, don't I? Yes, I said, but something in my chest tightened. The doorbell rang. Sylvia stood outside, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. May I come in? She asked quietly. I nodded, and she entered, freezing when she saw Bryant. The tension in the room could have cut glass. I found these. She pulled out a stack of papers from her bag. In the attic. Bryant's old stories, from when he was young. Bryant stiffened. Mom, don't. They're beautiful, she whispered. Creative, imaginative. And I killed that creativity, didn't I? That doesn't matter now, he said. It matters. She slammed the papers down. I did this. I made you believe you weren't good enough, and look what it led to. I watched them, mother and son, both breaking in different ways. I wanted to make you proud. Bryant's voice was barely audible. By lying, by stealing. Sylvia shook her head. I raised you better than that. Did you? He stood up suddenly. All I ever heard was how I wasn't measuring up, how I needed to be more successful, more impressive, more everything. Bryant, I started, but he was on a roll. Do you know what it's like, living with that pressure, watching your wife create something so beautiful while he choked, while you can barely string 2 sentences together because your mother's voice is always in your head, telling you it's not good enough? Sylvia sank into a chair, her face ashen. I never meant. I know you didn't, he said softly. But you did it anyway. The room fell silent. Outside, a camera flashed, another photographer hoping for a shot through our windows. I have to face the consequences, Bryant said finally. The publishing house is suing. My firm put me on leave. It's all falling apart. Good, Zoe muttered. But I wasn't so sure anymore. You need help, I said, surprising myself. Professional help, both of you do. Sylvia nodded slowly. She's right. Why are you being kind to me? Bryant asked. After what I did. Because I understand pressure, I said. I understand feeling like you're not enough. It's why I hid behind a pen name in the first place. The difference is, Zoe interjected, you didn't steal someone else's work. No, I agreed. But I'm not interested in revenge anymore. I just want my life back, my voice back. Bryant stood up. I'll move out tonight. Yes, I said. You will. He gathered his coat, then paused. The book, it really is brilliant, Kaya. I'm sorry I tried to make it mine. After he and Sylvia left, Zoe hugged me. You're too forgiving. No, I wiped my eyes. I'm just tired of anger. It's time to write my own next chapter. My phone buzzed. Rachel again. The publishing house wants to meet tomorrow. They're talking about a multi-book deal, under your real name this time. I looked around our living room, at the life Bryant and I had built. The bookstore receipts on the coffee table, the family photos on the wall, the half-finished manuscript in my laptop. Tell them yes, I said, but I have one condition. What's that? The dedication in the next edition of Shadows of Silence. I want to change it. To what? I thought about Bryant's childhood stories, about Sylvia's crushing expectations, about my own journey to find my voice. To everyone who's ever felt not good enough, I said. Sometimes the hardest story to tell is your own. Zoe squeezed my hand. Now that's a story worth telling. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through our windows. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, interviews, legal meetings, decisions about the future. But for now, I sat in my quiet living room, opened my laptop, and began to write. This time, under my own name. And how did it feel when your husband claimed your work as his own? The talk show host leaned forward. Her expression practiced sympathy. Like drowning, I said simply. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my new book. 3 months had passed since the award ceremony. Bryant had moved to Seattle, started therapy, and signed a legal agreement acknowledging his theft. The media circus was finally dying down, but the aftermath still rippled through our lives. Of course, the host smiled, but surely our viewers want to know. They want to know about the story, I interrupted firmly. About hope, redemption, and finding your voice. That's what matters. Backstage, after the interview, Zoe handed me a coffee. You handled that well. I'm tired of being the woman whose husband stole her book. I want to be known for my writing. Speaking of writing, she pulled out her phone, showing me the latest bestseller list. My new novel, written under my real name, sat at number 3. Not bad for a bookstore manager with a hobby, I grinned. The bookstore had changed too. Dad had added an local author section, prominently featuring both my books. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Remember when we used to hide your manuscripts in the storage room? He said that evening, as we closed up shop. Now look at you. A customer approached the counter, clutching my new book. Would you sign this? I love how you wrote about forgiveness. It must have been hard, after everything. I signed the book, thinking about Bryant's last email. I'm doing better. The therapist says I need to find my own voice. Maybe someday I'll actually write something worth reading. It's not always about forgiveness, I told the customer. Sometimes it's about understanding. Later that night, Rachel called with news. The film rights are generating a lot of interest, and there's talk about a speaking tour, writing workshops, literary festivals. People want to hear your story, the real one. I looked at my laptop, where my 3rd novel was taking shape. Will I still have time to write? We'll make time, she promised. That's what matters most now. The next morning, Dustin stopped by the store. The writing group misses you. I miss them too. Come back, he said, not as a famous author, just as Kaya, who used to bring terrible coffee and great stories. I hugged him. Next Tuesday. The bell above the door chimed, and Sylvia walked in. We hadn't spoken since that night in my living room. I've been reading your new book, she said quietly. The mother in the story, is she me? She's every parent who pushes too hard, I replied. Every voice that makes someone doubt themselves. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Bryant called yesterday. He's writing again. Children's stories, if you can believe it. I can, I said, and meant it. My phone buzzed, another interview request. The subject line read, From Shadow to Spotlight, the Kaya story. No, I said aloud, typing a response. That's not my story anymore. Zoe looked up from the book she was shelving. What is your story? I gestured around the bookstore, at the readers browsing shelves, at my father helping a young girl find the perfect book, at my laptop, waiting for the next chapter. This, I said, all of this. That evening, I got an unexpected email from the National Literature Awards Committee. They were creating a new category for emerging voices, and they wanted me to be a judge. Your experience, the email read, has sparked an important conversation about authenticity and recognition in literature. I thought about all the writers out there, hiding their words, doubting their voices, about Bryant, starting over with children's stories, about Sylvia, learning to listen instead of judge, about my own journey from silence to speech. Yes, I wrote back, I'd be honored. At home, I opened my laptop to work on the new novel. The protagonist was different this time, not running from her past, but running toward her future, not hiding her voice, but letting it soar. My phone lit up with a text from Zoe. Dad wants to expand the bookstore, says we need more room for the local authors section. Wonder whose fault that is. I smiled, thinking about the shy writers who now approached me at the store, sharing their hidden manuscripts, their secret dreams. Every time I told them the same thing. Your voice matters, use it. The cursor blinked on my screen. Waiting. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of my new apartment, smaller than the old house, but filled with books and light and possibility. I began to type. This time, there was no bathroom hiding spot, no secret pen name, no fear of judgment, just words flowing from my fingers, telling stories that needed to be told. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about Bryant or betrayal or even forgiveness. It was about finding my voice and finally, gloriously, using it. The bookstore hummed with excited voices as readers filled every available space. My father stood near the entrance, beaming as he directed traffic. Zoe arranged the last few chairs in our newly expanded reading area. Ready? Rachel touched my shoulder, clipboard in hand. I nodded, watching the crowd settle. This wasn't just another book signing or reading. This was different. Welcome to Writer's Voice, I said into the microphone. A safe space for hidden stories. The workshop participants, 20 aspiring writers, clutched their notebooks. Some had been hiding their words for years, decades even, just like I had. Before we begin, I said, I want to introduce someone. Bryant stepped forward from the back of the store. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He looked different, calmer, less polished, more real. Hi, he said simply. I'm here to talk about what happens when you steal someone else's voice instead of finding your own. The room fell silent. This wasn't part of the program they'd signed up for. My first book comes out next month, he continued. A children's story about a little boy who learns it's okay to fail. I wrote every word myself. It's not going to win awards. It might not even sell well, but it's mine. I watched the workshop participants lean forward, drawn in by his honesty. The hardest part wasn't the public shame or the legal consequences, Bryant said. It was facing myself in the mirror and admitting I'd silenced someone else because I was too afraid to speak with my own voice. Sylvia, sitting in the front row, wiped her eyes. Now, I took the microphone back. Let's talk about your stories, the ones you've been afraid to tell. One by one, they shared. A grandmother who'd been writing romance novels in secret for 30 years. A teenager with a sci-fi epic hidden under his bed. A businessman who wrote poetry during his lunch breaks. Why do we hide? I asked them. Fear of judgment, someone called out. Not good enough, said another. Family expectations, a quiet voice added. I pulled out my first novel, the one Bryant had claimed. This book isn't just about finding your voice. It's about what happens when you let others silence it. The door chimed. My father led in a group of young writers from the local high school, where I'd started mentoring. Your voice matters, I told the room. Even if it shakes, even if it whispers, even if you think no one wants to hear it. Bryant stood up again. I have something for everyone here. He handed out copies of his children's book, not yet released. This is what starting over looks like. It's not perfect, but it's authentic. I watched him interact with the workshop participants, saw how they responded to his vulnerability. Redemption wasn't about grand gestures. It was about small truths, quietly shared. The bookstore's writing group meets every Tuesday, I announced. You're all welcome, no hiding allowed. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Sylvia approached Bryant. Their relationship was still fragile, but healing. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Not because of success or failure, but because you're finally being honest. Rachel caught my eye, pointing to her watch. I had a publisher's meeting in an hour about my next book. Go, Zoe said. I'll clean up here. But I wasn't ready to leave. The energy in the room felt too important to abandon. The meeting can wait, I told Rachel. These stories can't. I sat with the remaining participants, listening to their hidden words emerge, each voice unique, each story valuable. Bryant joined us, keeping a respectful distance, but participating genuinely. I'm learning to listen, he said when someone asked why he was there. Really listen. My father brought us coffee, pride shining in his eyes, as he watched his expanded bookstore become exactly what it was meant to be, a sanctuary for stories. This feels right, he said, squeezing my shoulder. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the fresh paint on the wall behind the reading area. In careful letters, we'd written, "Every voice matters." Under it, bookshelves held works by local authors, their dreams no longer hidden in storage rooms or bathroom writing sessions. My books sat among them, not above, not below, just part of the chorus. Same time next week? Someone asked as the workshop wound down. Every week, I promised. For as long as there are stories to tell. Bryant paused at the door on his way out. Thank you, he said quietly, not for forgiving me, but for showing me what real writing looks like. I watched him leave, then turned back to my notebook where I'd been jotting down ideas for the next workshop. The page was filled with possibilities, each one a potential voice waiting to be heard. The bookstore settled into evening quiet, but it wasn't silence anymore. It was anticipation, the peaceful pause between words that makes the story possible. I opened my laptop and began to write.
I used to believe that love conquered all, that trust was unbreakable when built on years of shared dreams and promises. That was before I found the statement that shattered my world into a million gleaming pieces. My name is Lucille, and until last Tuesday I thought I had it all figured out. A corner office at Morrison & Blake Financial Services, a marriage that made my colleagues envious, and the kind of life my grandmother had always dreamed for me. The inheritance she left me was supposed to be our nest egg, our future. Another late night? Nigel's voice carried from the kitchen as I walked through our front door. The familiar smell of his signature pasta filled the house. The Harrison portfolio needed reviewing, I called back, dropping my briefcase by the stairs. Something felt off about their numbers. He appeared in the doorway, dish towel over his shoulder, that boyish smile that had made me fall for him 8 years ago still intact. Always the perfectionist. Come here. I let him pull me into a hug, breathing in the scent of garlic and his cologne. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have pushed him away. Mail came for you, he said, gesturing to the pile on the counter. Looks important. I flipped through the envelopes until I reached one from our bank. Usually Nigel handled the joint accounts, but this one was addressed to me specifically. I tore it open, expecting nothing more than a routine statement. The first transaction that caught my eye made my blood run cold. Nigel, I said, keeping my voice steady, why is there a transfer of $50,000 to your mother's account? He froze mid-stir, his back to me. Oh, that. Mum needed some help with her medical bills. Medical bills? I flipped to the next page. And I suppose Bruce needed medical attention too. Another 40,000 to his account? The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Luce, I can explain. Explain what? My finger traced down the list of transactions. That you've been systematically draining my grandmother's inheritance to fund your family's lifestyle? The Maldives vacation your mother wouldn't stop bragging about at Christmas. Was that her medical treatment? He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. Their family, Lucille, they needed help. They needed help? I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. That money was meant for our future, Nigel, for the children we talked about having. How much is left? His silence was answer enough. How long? I demanded, gripping the counter to steady myself. How long have you been lying to me? 2 years, he whispered. Mom was in trouble with her mortgage, and then Bruce's business was failing, and it just snowballed. I thought about all the times I'd sat across from clients, advising them on protecting their assets, while my own husband had been stealing from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Does your mother know where the money came from? He nodded slowly. They all do. They thought you'd understand, that since we're family now... Family? I cut him off. Family doesn't steal from each other, Nigel. Family doesn't conspire behind your back to take what isn't theirs. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Drinks tonight. You seem off lately. If she only knew. We can fix this, Nigel pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. I'll talk to Mom, make arrangements to pay it back. With what money? I asked quietly. Your mother's vacation fund? Bruce's new Mercedes? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, a car alarm went off, its shrill wail matching the screaming in my head. I trusted you, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I trusted all of you. Lucille, please. I need some air. I grabbed my keys from the counter, the statement still clutched in my other hand. Don't follow me. As I drove through the darkening streets, my grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Never let anyone make you feel small, Lucille. Not even the ones you love. I pulled into the parking lot of our favourite bar, where Sandra would be waiting. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Nigel, but something else caught my eye. An email notification about our holiday home's property taxes. The holiday home we'd bought last year, the one Nigel's family didn't know about yet. A plan began to form in my mind, sharp and clear as crystal. If they wanted to take what was mine, maybe it was time to give them exactly what they deserved. I smiled for the first time since opening that statement. Nigel's family had no idea what was coming. You're going to do what? Sandra nearly choked on her martini, her eyes wide with disbelief. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the warmth of revenge wash over me. I'm going to sell the holiday home, the one Nigel thinks is our secret nest egg. And then what? Show them the sold sign and say, surprise. Sandra leaned forward, her voice dropping. Lucille, this isn't you. The old me died when I saw that bank statement. I pulled out my phone, showing her the real estate agent's message. The market's hot right now. I can get well above what we paid for it. Have you even confronted his mother about this? The memory of Alia's smug face at Christmas flashed through my mind. Oh, you mean when she was showing off her Maldives photos? The ones my grandmother's money paid for? Sandra winced. Okay, point taken, but... My phone buzzed. Another message from Nigel. I ignored it. Remember what my grandmother used to say? I asked, tracing the rim of my wine glass. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people crash into the consequences of their own actions. I don't think she meant it quite like this, Sandra muttered. The next morning, I met with Rachel, my real estate agent, at her office. The morning sun cast long shadows across her desk as she spread out the paperwork. You're sure about this? She asked, highlighting the signature lines. It's a beautiful property. I'm sure. I signed my name with steady hands. How long until we can list it? We can have it up by this afternoon. The market's incredibly active right now. Perfect. Phase 1 of my plan was in motion. When I got home that evening, Nigel was waiting. He'd been sleeping in the guest room since our confrontation, but tonight he was in the kitchen, cooking again. A peace offering. "I talked to Mom," he said as I walked in. "She's willing to work something out." "Is she?" I kept my voice neutral, setting my briefcase down. "And what exactly did she suggest?" He stirred the pot nervously. She offered to let us use their timeshare in Florida. "As compensation." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. "Their timeshare, the one they bought with my money?" "Lucille, please. They're trying." "Not hard enough." I pulled out my laptop, making a show of checking my email. "But speaking of properties, I was thinking we should invite your family to the holiday home. You know, the one we bought last year." His spoon clattered against the pot. "What? Why not? It might be nice, all of us together. One big, happy family." The words tasted like vinegar in my mouth. "But we agreed to keep that place private, our special getaway." I smiled, thinking of the sold sign that would soon be standing in the front yard. "Times change, Nigel. People change. Besides, your mother's always talking about how family should share everything." He studied my face, uncertainty clouding his features. "You're serious about this?" "Absolutely." I opened my phone and started typing. "In fact, I'm sending them all invitations right now. Next weekend would be perfect." "Lucille." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't you trust me?" I echoed his words from countless conversations, watching them hit their mark. Later that night, I sat on our back porch, my grandmother's old shawl wrapped around my shoulders. The stars were bright, reminding me of nights spent on her porch listening to her stories of resilience and dignity in the face of betrayal. My phone lit up with responses from Nigel's family. Aaliyah's message was typically condescending. "How lovely of you to finally share with the family. We accept, of course." Bruce's response was immediate. "Great. Trisha and I could use a weekend away." I closed my eyes, imagining their faces when they realized what I'd done. The property would be sold by Thursday, leaving just enough time for the new owners to take possession before the family's planned arrival. Sandra's words from the bar echoed in my head. "This isn't you." Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't who I used to be. But then again, I used to be the woman who trusted her husband, who believed in family loyalty, who thought love meant something. My phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel. "First showing tomorrow. Multiple buyers interested." I smiled into the darkness. Grandmother always said that sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales. She just never mentioned that sometimes you have to help it along. Inside, I heard Nigel on the phone, probably talking to his mother. His voice was muffled, but I caught fragments. "Different lately. Worried. Don't know what to do." "Good. Let him worry. Let them all worry." I pulled my grandmother's shawl tighter around my shoulders and started making lists in my head. People to call, arrangements to make, pieces to move into place. The game was on, and this time I was writing the rules. The restaurant buzzed with dinner conversation as I sat across from Aaliyah, watching her dissect her overpriced salmon with surgical precision. She'd insisted on this mother-daughter dinner before the weekend getaway, probably to scope out my intentions. "I must say," she dabbed her lips with her napkin, "this invitation came as quite a surprise. You've always been so private about your affairs." I smiled, cutting into my steak. "Well, as you always say, family should share everything." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Indeed, though I hope you understand our concern about Nigel lately. He seems troubled." "Does he?" I took a sip of wine. "I hadn't noticed." "Come now, Lucille." She reached across the table, her manicured hand stopping short of touching mine. "We both know things haven't been quite right since that unfortunate business with the money." "Unfortunate business?" The wine turned bitter in my mouth. "Is that what we're calling theft now?" Aaliyah's smile tightened. "We preferred to think of it as family helping family. Surely you understand." "What I understand," I cut in, "is that my grandmother worked 60 years as a teacher to leave me that inheritance. But please, tell me more about how your Maldives vacation was family helping family." A couple at the next table glanced our way. Aaliyah lowered her voice, leaning forward. Now, dear, let's not make a scene. We're all trying to move forward, aren't we? That's why you've invited us to this lovely holiday home? Exactly. I forced a smile. It's time everyone got what they deserve. My phone vibrated. A text from Rachel. Paperwork finalized. Keys transfer Thursday. Everything all right? Aaliyah asked, noticing my expression. Perfect. I tucked the phone away. Just confirming the weekend arrangements. Later that evening, I found Nigel waiting up in the living room. How was dinner with Mom? Illuminating. I dropped my keys in the bowl. Your brother called, by the way. He's bringing Roberto. My nephew, Nigel frowned, but he hates family gatherings. Apparently, Trisha insisted, something about family bonding. Nigel stood, approaching me cautiously. Luce, are you sure about this weekend? We could still cancel. And disappoint your mother, I stepped around him. She's so looking forward to seeing our holiday home, unless there's some reason you don't want them to come. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tell I'd noticed years ago. No, it's just, you've been different lately. Distant. Have I? I met his eyes. Or am I just finally seeing things clearly? The next morning, Sandra ambushed me at my office during lunch. This has gone far enough, she announced, dropping into the chair across from my desk. I talked to Rachel. I set down my sandwich. You what? She told me the house sold yesterday above asking price. Sandra leaned forward. Lucille, what happens when they show up and find strangers living there? Justice happens. I started gathering papers, avoiding her gaze. Karma happens. No, humiliation happens. To everyone involved, including you. She grabbed my wrist, forcing me to look at her. Is that really what your grandmother would want? My grandmother would want me to stand up for myself. Stand up, yes, but this? She shook her head. This is something else entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Trisha. Roberto's so excited about the weekend. Thank you for bringing the family together like this. Sandra saw the message. Even the kid? Really? He's 16, not 6. But something twisted in my stomach. Besides, he should learn early that actions have consequences. Like his aunt's actions? Sandra stood, gathering her purse. Just think about what you're really trying to accomplish here, and whether it's worth the cost. After she left, I stared at the family photo on my desk, taken last Christmas, before I knew the truth. Aaliyah, in her expensive new jewellery, Bruce showing off his watch, Trisha fussing over Roberto, Nigel's arm around my waist. All of it paid for with my grandmother's money. My phone rang, Rachel again. The new owners want to move in Friday morning. Will that be a problem? I thought about Aaliyah's smug smile at dinner, about Nigel's nervous hands, about Roberto's excitement. No, I said firmly. No problem at all. That evening, I packed my overnight bag for the weekend, laying out the documents I'd need. Property sale papers, bank statements, proof of every transaction they'd tried to hide. Nigel appeared in the doorway. Need help packing? No. I zipped the bag closed. Everything's exactly where it needs to be. Tomorrow they'd all learn what it feels like to have something taken away. Tomorrow the scales would finally balance. I just hoped Sandra was wrong about the cost. The caravan of cars pulled into the holiday home's driveway just as the sun began to set. I watched through the kitchen window as Aaliyah emerged from her Mercedes, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the fading light. This location is divine, she called out, while Bruce helped Trisha unload their SUV. Though I would have chosen something a bit more substantial. Roberto slouched out of the back seat, headphones firmly in place, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. At least someone was being honest about their feelings. Mum, please, Nigel said, carrying their bags inside. It's perfect for what we need. What they needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lucille, darling, Trisha bustled in, pulling me into an unwanted hug. This is so generous of you, bringing the family together like this. I extracted myself from her embrace. Well, you know what they say about family and sharing. Speaking of sharing, Bruce appeared, already heading for the wine fridge. "I hope you stocked up for the weekend." "Help yourself," I said, watching him select an expensive bottle. "It's what family does, right?" Aaliyah shot me a sharp look but said nothing. The evening progressed exactly as I'd expected. Bruce dominated the conversation with tales of his latest business ventures, while Tricia fussed over everyone's plates. Roberto remained glued to his phone, occasionally rolling his eyes at his parents' attempts to engage him. "Put that away," Bruce snapped at his son. "We're here for family time." "Whatever," Roberto muttered, but tucked the phone away. His eyes met mine across the table, and I saw a flash of understanding there that made me uncomfortable. After dinner, I escaped to the back deck, needing air. The sound of waves in the distance usually calmed me, but tonight they seemed to echo my turbulent thoughts. "Mom's driving me crazy," Nigel's voice came from behind me. "I'm sorry about all this." "Are you?" I turned to face him. "Sorry about what exactly?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I heard you and Mom at dinner the other night. At the restaurant. Eavesdropping now?" "The waiter told me you seemed upset." He ran his hands through his hair again. "Luce, I know I messed up, but they're still family." "Family?" I laughed quietly. "Is that what you told yourself when you were transferring my money to their accounts? That family makes it okay?" Inside, I could hear Aaliyah directing Bruce on where to put their bags. Still controlling everything, still acting like she owned the place. "Please," Nigel's voice cracked. "I'll do anything to make this right. I've been looking for better jobs, trying to figure out how to pay you back." "Mom," Roberto appeared in the doorway, interrupting Nigel's plea. "Dad's being a jerk again. Can I hang out here?" I nodded, grateful for the interruption. Roberto settled into one of the deck chairs, pulling out a sketchbook. "You draw?" I asked, noticing the detailed landscapes on the pages. "Yeah. Dad thinks it's a waste of time," he shrugged. "Says I should focus on business classes instead." "Like the business classes he took before losing all that money?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Roberto's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Nigel stepped forward quickly. "Nothing. He means nothing by it." "No. What did you mean?" Roberto pressed, looking at me. "Is that why you guys suddenly had money for that stupid car Dad bought?" "Roberto," Nigel started, but was cut off by Bruce's booming voice from inside. "Son, get in here and help your mother unpack." Roberto slammed his sketchbook shut. "I'm not deaf," he shouted back, but stood to go inside. At the door, he paused. "Thanks for letting me hide out here." After he left, Nigel turned to me. "Please don't drag him into this." "Into what?" I asked innocently. "The family business of taking what isn't yours." Through the window, I could see Aaliyah arranging her things in the master bedroom, my bedroom, as if she owned the place. Tomorrow she'd learn just how temporary her claim to this space was. "I hear them, you know," I said quietly. "When they think I'm not listening. Your mother planning more trips, Bruce talking about expanding his business, all while my grandmother's money sits in their accounts." "I'll talk to them again," Nigel promised. "Make them understand." "Understand what? That actions have consequences." I checked my phone, a message from Rachel confirming tomorrow's timeline. "Don't worry, Nigel, they'll understand soon enough." Inside, I could hear Aaliyah calling everyone to the living room for coffee and dessert, playing the perfect hostess in a house that wouldn't be here tomorrow. "Coming?" Nigel asked, holding the door. I smiled, thinking of the documents in my overnight bag upstairs. Of course. We wouldn't want to miss family time. The night was young and tomorrow promised to be unforgettable. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. I'd been watching the clock, counting down the minutes, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. "Who could that be?" Aaliyah asked from her perch on the sofa, where she'd been planning yet another family vacation on her iPad. "I'll get it," I said, standing before Nigel could move. Rachel stood on the doorstep with the new owners, exactly as planned. "Good morning, Lucille. We're here for the final walkthrough and key handover." The silence behind me was deafening. "I'm sorry," Aaliyah's voice cut through the tension. "Key handover?" "Yes." I turned to face the family, all frozen in various states of confusion. "I sold the house. The new owners take possession today. Bruce was the first to recover. This is a joke, right? Like the joke of stealing my inheritance? I pulled the stack of bank statements from my bag. Or maybe like the joke of using my grandmother's money to fund your failed business ventures. Lucille. Nigel stepped forward, his face pale. What have you done? What have I done? I laughed, the sound sharp and cold. I've simply followed the family tradition of taking what isn't mine. Oh, wait, no, this house was actually mine to sell. Tricia clutched her coffee cup, looking between me and Nigel. I don't understand. We just got here. And now you're leaving. I turned to Rachel and the new owners. Please come in. Don't mind my soon-to-be ex-family. They were just packing. Ex-family? Alia stood, her face flushed with anger. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I threw the bank statements onto the coffee table. You mean like spending my grandmother's life savings on your luxury vacations? Or helping Bruce buy his Mercedes? Please tell me more about everything you've done for me. Roberto picked up one of the statements, his eyes widening as he read. Dad, is this true? Is this where the money for your new car came from? Bruce snatched the paper from his hands. Stay out of this, Roberto. Why? I asked. Afraid he'll learn the family business too early? Stealing, lying, betraying trust? That's enough, Nigel shouted, making everyone jump. This is cruel, Lucille. Even for what we did, this is cruel. Cruel? I turned to him slowly. Was it cruel when you watched your mother spend my inheritance on first-class flights? Was it cruel when you helped Bruce hide his transfers? Or did cruelty only start mattering when you got caught? The new owners shifted uncomfortably by the door. Rachel cleared her throat. Perhaps we should come back. No need, I said firmly. The house needs to be vacated today. Those were the terms of sale. You can't do this, Aaliyah hissed, her perfect composure finally cracking. We'll fight this. With what? The money you stole from me? I smiled. Go ahead. I have all the documentation right here. Should we call the police? Discuss fraud charges? Tricia started crying, while Bruce cursed under his breath and began gathering their things. Roberto stood apart from them all, still holding one of the bank statements, his face a mask of disgust. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. All those sudden gifts, the trips. I knew we couldn't afford it. Roberto, go pack your things, Bruce ordered. No. Roberto looked at his father. You're no better than the guys who scammed Grandpa out of his retirement. You're worse, because you did it to family. Aaliyah gasped. How dare you speak to your father that way? How dare you steal from Lucille? Roberto shot back. I watched as they all began to unravel. Tricia crying harder, Bruce and Roberto arguing, Aaliyah trying to maintain control of a situation long past controlling. Only Nigel remained silent, staring at the floor. The movers will be here in an hour, I announced. I suggest you all be gone by then. Lucille, Nigel finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Please, we can work this out. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. The man I'd loved, who I'd trusted with everything, who had betrayed me so completely. No, I said softly. We really can't. As they gathered their belongings, amid tears and accusations and slammed doors, Roberto paused beside me. I'm sorry, he said, for what they did, for what we took from you. I touched his shoulder gently. You didn't take anything, Roberto. Don't carry their guilt. He nodded, then followed his parents out the door. Rachel and the new owners began their walkthrough as the cars pulled away. I stood on the front porch, watching them disappear down the drive, feeling strangely empty. My phone buzzed. A message from Sandra. Is it done? I looked at the house that was no longer mine, at the family that was driving away, at the life I'd just blown apart. Yes, I typed back. It's done. But as I watched Nigel's car disappear around the bend, I wondered if anything was really finished at all. The cafe was nearly empty when Nigel found me 3 days later. I'd been expecting him. The dozens of missed calls and messages had made that inevitable. You look terrible, I said as he slid into the booth across from me. The dark circles under his eyes matched the wrinkled state of his usually pristine shirt. "Mom's in the hospital," he said without preamble. "Anxiety attack. The doctors say stress triggered it." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Is that supposed to make me feel guilty?" "No." He rubbed his face. "I don't know. Everything's falling apart, Luce. Bruce's wife left him, took Roberto with her. Mum's a mess. And I..." He trailed off. "And you what?" I set my spoon down. "Finally have to face consequences." The waitress approached, but one look at our faces sent her retreating. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said. "Mum was in trouble with her mortgage, and she was crying, and I thought I could fix it. Take a little money, pay it back before you noticed. But you didn't stop at a little, did you?" He shook his head. "Once they knew about the money, it was like a switch flipped. Every problem became an emergency. Every want became a need. And I was trapped. You could have told me." "Could I?" He leaned forward. "You're the successful one, the smart one. I was already the failure who couldn't match your salary. How could I admit I'd betrayed you too?" A laugh escaped me, bitter and sharp. "So you betrayed me more to avoid admitting you'd betrayed me?" "That's some logic, Nigel." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know it makes no sense, but I've lost everything now. You, the respect of my nephew, my family's trust. Even Mom won't look me in the eye anymore." Outside, rain began to fall, matching the mood. A text lit up my phone, Sandra asking if I was okay. I ignored it. "Roberto called me yesterday," I said, watching Nigel's reaction. "Did you know he's applying to art school?" Surprise flickered across his face. "What? But Bruce would never..." "Bruce doesn't get a say anymore. Trisha's supporting Roberto's choice." I took a sip of coffee. Funny how truth can set people free. Is that what this was about? Setting people free? No. I met his eyes. This was about justice, about consequences, about showing your family they can't just take what they want without paying a price. He was quiet for a long moment. "And what about us? What's the price for what we had?" "Had," I emphasized. Past tense. "Lucille, please." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'll do anything to make this right. I've been looking at jobs in other cities, places where we could start fresh." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. Do you really think I could ever trust you again? Sleep next to you, share a life with you, knowing what you did?" The rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. A few tables away, an elderly couple shared a piece of pie, feeding each other bites and laughing softly. "I love you," he whispered. "Doesn't that count for anything? Love without trust is just another way to get hurt." I stood, gathering my purse. "Your mother will be fine. She's tougher than she lets on. Bruce will either learn from this or he won't. That's his choice. And you..." I paused, looking at the man I'd once planned to grow old with. "You need to figure out who you are without your family's expectations crushing you." "And what about you?" His voice was barely audible above the rain. "Who are you without me?" I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's strength, of Roberto's courage to choose his own path, of Sandra's unwavering friendship. "I'm someone who finally understands that sometimes love isn't enough. That trust, once broken, leaves scars that no amount of apologies can heal." "So that's it?" He looked up at me, eyes glistening. 8 years together, just gone?" "No." I pulled out my wallet, leaving money for my coffee. 8 years gone the moment you chose your family's greed over our future. Today is just me finally accepting that truth. As I walked toward the door, he called out one last time. "What do I tell them? The family?" I turned back, rain framing the window behind me. "Tell them thank you for teaching me that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who claim to love you best." Outside, the rain soaked through my jacket, but I didn't rush to my car. Instead, I stood there, letting the water wash over me, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed again. Sandra. "Wine and pizza at my place tonight?" This time I replied, "Yes, I think it's time to start new traditions." Behind me, through the cafe window, I could see Nigel with his head in his hands. But for the first time since this all began, I felt no urge to look back. Sandra's doorbell rang just as we were opening our second bottle of wine. Through the peephole, I saw Aaliyah standing there, perfectly coiffed, despite her recent hospital stay. "Don't answer it," I whispered, but Sandra was already opening the door. "We need to talk," Aaliyah announced, stepping inside uninvited. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating without her usual entourage. Sandra glanced at me. "I'll give you two some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "Whatever she has to say, she can say it in front of you." Aaliyah perched on the edge of an armchair, her designer purse clutched tight in her lap. "The doctors say I should avoid stress, but I couldn't leave things like this." "Like what?" I took a deliberate sip of wine. "Like the mess you made stealing my inheritance?" "Like family torn apart," she snapped, then caught herself smoothing her skirt. "Nigel's devastated. Bruce's marriage is over. Even Roberto won't speak to us. Sounds like karma to me." "Is that what you wanted?" Her voice cracked. "To destroy everything." Sandra shifted uncomfortably on the couch beside me, but I held my ground. "No, Aaliyah. That's what you wanted when you took my money. I just made sure everyone saw the truth." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "The truth is we were desperate. Bruce's business was failing. The bank was threatening foreclosure on my house. So you stole from me." I set my glass down hard. "Instead of asking for help, instead of being honest, you all conspired to take what wasn't yours. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family." I was standing now, years of hurt pouring out. "Family doesn't manipulate and lie and treat someone's inheritance like their personal piggy bank." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Roberto. "I tracked Mum's phone," he said, stepping inside. "Figured she'd come here." Aaliyah turned to him. "Roberto, darling." "Don't." He held up his hand. "I'm not here for you. I came to thank Lucille." That stopped everyone short. Sandra quietly slipped into the kitchen, leaving us to our family drama. "Thank me?" I asked. "For what?" "For showing me what real strength looks like." He pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. "I got accepted to art school, full scholarship." Aaliyah gasped. "But your father's business is built on lies," Roberto cut in. "Just like everything else in this family, I'm done pretending." I watched Aaliyah's face crumple, years of careful control finally breaking. "We were trying to protect our way of life." "By stealing someone else's?" Roberto shook his head. "That's not protection, Grandma, that's theft." My phone buzzed. A text from Nigel. "Mum's gone. Are you with her?" "He's worried about you," I told Aaliyah, showing her the message. "He's always worried about me." She dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. "That's how we got here, isn't it? His need to fix everything, my need to maintain appearances. And my inheritance paid the price," I finished. Roberto sat on the arm of my chair. "Mum's filing for divorce, says she's tired of Dad's schemes." "Good for her," I said, meaning it. Aaliyah stood suddenly. "I should go. The doctors said—" "Sit down," I interrupted. "We're not done." She sank back into the chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "You want to fix this?" I asked. "Really fix it?" She nodded slowly. "Then start with the truth. All of it. No more manipulation. No more pretense." "The truth?" She glanced at Roberto, then back to me. "The truth is, I was jealous. Of your success, your independence, everything came so easily to you." "Easy?" I laughed. "I worked 2 jobs through college. My grandmother saved for 30 years to leave me that inheritance. Nothing about it was easy." "I know that now." She twisted the handkerchief in her hands. "I know we can never repay what we took, not just the money, but the trust." "No," I agreed. "You can't." Roberto stood. "But we can do better going forward. Be better." Sandra reappeared with fresh glasses of wine and a knowing look. "Family's complicated," she said, handing them out. "But secrets make it toxic." Aaliyah took a small sip. "What do we do now?" "Now?" I looked at Roberto's acceptance letter, at Aaliyah's trembling hands, at the mess we'd all made. "Now we start over. With truth this time." My phone buzzed again. Nigel sending another worried message about his mother. "Tell him I'm safe," Aaliyah said quietly. "Tell him. Tell him I'm finally learning what family really means." Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Sandra's living room. Nothing was fixed, not really. But as I watched Roberto show his grandmother his portfolio, saw her genuine interest in his art for the first time, I realized that sometimes breaking things is the only way to rebuild them stronger. "To new beginnings," Sandra raised her glass. "To truth," Roberto added. "To family," Aaliyah whispered. I lifted my glass thinking of my grandmother's wisdom. "To consequences." The autumn breeze rustled through my grandmother's garden as I knelt to plant the last of her favourite roses. Sandra worked beside me, carefully arranging mulch around the new bushes. "She would have loved this," Sandra said, sitting back on her heels, using the house sale money to restore her garden. It felt right. I brushed dirt from my hands. Better than letting it sit in a bank account like the inheritance did. The sound of a car pulling up made us both turn. Roberto stepped out carrying his portfolio and wearing a paint-splattered t-shirt. "Sorry I'm late," he called out. "Class ran over." "You're just in time for lunch," I replied, leading them both inside. The kitchen still smelled like my grandmother's recipes, though now my attempts at her famous lasagna filled the oven. "Mom wanted me to give you this," Roberto said, pulling an envelope from his bag as we settled around the kitchen table. Inside was a check, not for the full amount they'd taken, but significant nonetheless. "She's been selling her jewellery," he explained. "Says she doesn't need the reminders of who she used to be." Sandra examined the check. "That's got to be at least 20 pieces from her collection." 23? A voice said from the doorway. We all turned to see Aaliyah standing there, looking different in simple slacks and a sweater. "May I come in?" I nodded, watching as she took in the kitchen's transformation. The fresh paint, the new herbs growing in the window, the life returning to my grandmother's space. "Bruce called," she said, accepting the coffee Sandra offered. "He's agreed to sell the Mercedes. Says he wants to contribute to making things right." "And Nigel?" I asked quietly. "Starting his new job next week, teaching high school economics." She smiled slightly. "Says he wants to help young people understand money better than he did." Roberto opened his portfolio, spreading his latest works across the table. Vibrant paintings captured moments of our family drama. Aaliyah in the hospital, Bruce standing alone in an empty house, me in the garden bringing life back to dead earth. "These are for my final project," he explained. "The professor says art should tell truth, even when it hurts." "Speaking of truth," Aaliyah reached into her purse, "I found these while sorting through my things." She laid out old photographs. My grandmother at my college graduation, at family dinners, always watching, always wise. "She knew, you know," I said, touching one photo gently, "about the kind of people you all were. She told me to be careful, but I thought love would be enough." "Love without respect is just control," Sandra murmured, quoting my grandmother's favourite saying. The timer dinged, and I pulled the lasagna from the oven. It wasn't perfect. The edges were a bit too brown, the cheese not quite melted right, but it was honest work, my own attempt at carrying forward a legacy. "I've been thinking," Aaliyah said as I served the plates, "about what your grandmother taught you about money, about worth. I spent so long trying to appear valuable that I forgot how to actually be valuable." "That's why you took the inheritance?" Roberto asked. She nodded slowly. "It was never really about the money. It was about what it represented. Success, security, respect. All the things I thought I could buy." "But you can't," I said. "Those things have to be earned." "Like trust?" She met my eyes. "Like trust," I agreed. Sandra raised her glass. "To earning things honestly." "To Grandma's garden," Roberto added. "To new growth," Aaliyah whispered. I looked around the table, at Sandra's unwavering friendship, at Roberto's brave new path, at Aaliyah's humble attempts at redemption. The inheritance was gone, but something else had grown in its place. Understanding, perhaps. Or wisdom. My phone lit up with a text from Nigel. "The divorce papers are final. Thank you for teaching me about consequences." I showed the message to Sandra, who squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, realizing I meant it. "Some things have to break before they can heal properly." Roberto looked up from his plate. "Like bones?" "Like trust," Aaliyah answered softly. "Like family." Outside, the roses caught the afternoon light, their new blooms promising future gardens, future growth. My grandmother had always said that money was like water. It could nourish growth or drown you depending on how you used it. "I have something else for you," Aaliyah said, pulling out another envelope. "Your grandmother's recipes. I found them in Nigel's things. They belong here with you." I opened the envelope, recognizing the familiar handwriting. At the bottom of each recipe, my grandmother had written little notes, wisdom disguised as cooking tips. "Remember," I read aloud from the lasagna recipe, "the secret ingredient isn't in the sauce. It's in the love you put into making it right." Sandra laughed. She always did have a way of making everything a life lesson. "She still does," I said, looking around at my imperfect healing family. "She still does."
I never expected revenge to arrive gift-wrapped in a merger and acquisition report, but there it was on my desk at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. My company had just acquired Hoffman Industries, the very firm where my ex-husband Anton and my dear cousin Trinity had been working for the past 3 years. Life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. My name is Marissa, and 5 years ago, these two people destroyed everything I had built. Now, by some cosmic joke, they were about to become my employees. "Did you see the personnel list?" Juliet, my assistant, poked her head into my office, her expression a mix of concern and barely contained excitement. She'd been there through it all, watching me rebuild from nothing. I did. I kept my voice steady, though my hands were shaking as I set down my coffee mug. Quite the surprise, isn't it? Surprise? It's karma wrapped in a business deal. They're going to flip when they find out you're their new boss. The memory of that family reunion 5 years ago crashed over me like a wave. I could still see Trinity's face, tear-streaked and guilty, as she confessed everything. How she and Anton had been seeing each other for months. How they'd planned it all. The gradual draining of our joint accounts, the fabricated business losses, the perfectly timed divorce filing that left me with nothing but debt and broken trust. "Ms. Clayton," Edgar Hoffman's gravelly voice interrupted my thoughts as he appeared in my doorway. "Do you have a moment to discuss the transition?" I gestured for him to enter, noting how his expensive suit couldn't quite hide his discomfort. He'd sold his company to me for a reason, and I had a feeling I was about to find out why. "I assume you've noticed some familiar names in the employee roster," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Hard to miss your own ex-husband and cousin," I replied dryly. Edgar shifted uncomfortably. "I should mention that Anton has been problematic lately. His department's numbers don't add up, and there are discrepancies I can't explain. It's part of why I decided to sell." My phone buzzed with a text from Prudence, my mentor. "Heard the news. This is your chance. Don't waste it." "What exactly are you suggesting, Edgar?" I leaned forward, studying his face. "I'm suggesting that karma might need a little push." He pulled out a folder and placed it on my desk. "This contains everything I've gathered on Anton's activities over the past year. Use it however you see fit." As he left, Juliet returned with more coffee and a concerned look. "Trinity's online too. Says it's urgent." My heart jumped to my throat. "Put her through." "Marissa?" Trinity's voice was small, afraid. "I just heard about the acquisition. We need to talk. There are things you don't know about Anton, about what really happened." 5 years too late for explanations, don't you think?" "Please," she whispered. "It's not what you think. I made terrible mistakes, but there's more to the story. Anton, he's not done hurting people. You need to know the truth before—" The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone, while Juliet watched me with worried eyes. "What are you going to do?" Looking down at Edgar's folder, then at the merger documents that had started this all, I felt a smile creep across my face. I'm going to do what I do best, run this company. If that happens to make certain people uncomfortable, well, that's just business, isn't it? My computer pinged with a new email. Anonymous sender, subject line. What you don't know about Prudence Hill. Juliet! I called out as she turned to leave. Cancel my afternoon meetings. Looks like we have some digging to do. She grinned, already pulling out her tablet. Finally, some excitement around here. As I opened the email, I couldn't help but think about how I'd built my company focusing on women's empowerment, helping others find their strength after betrayal. Now here I was, faced with the ultimate test of my own principles. Would I choose revenge, or would I rise above it? The answer, I suspected, lay somewhere in Edgar's folder and this mysterious email. Either way, Anton and Trinity were about to learn what happens when you underestimate the woman you left behind. I picked up my phone and texted Prudence back. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring everything you know about Anton's current projects. The response came instantly. Time to make them pay? I stared at her message for a long moment before replying. Time to uncover the truth, all of it. Whatever game was being played here, I had a feeling I was no longer just a pawn. The question was, who else was moving pieces on this board? The click of my heels echoed through Hoffman Industries' lobby as I walked in for the first transition meeting. Heads turned, whispers followed, and I caught the exact moment Anton recognized me, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth, face draining of color. Welcome to your new workplace, I announced to the gathered employees, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm Marissa, CEO of Empower Solutions, and as of today, your new boss. Trinity, standing in the back corner, looked like she might faint. Good. Ms. Clayton, Xander, Anton's business partner, stepped forward with an extended hand. We've heard impressive things about your leadership style. His smile seemed genuine, but there was something calculating in his eyes. Thank you. I believe in transparency and direct communication, I said, looking straight at Anton. Speaking of which, department heads, my office in 15 minutes. As the crowd dispersed, Juliet appeared at my elbow. Prudence is waiting in the conference room with those files you requested. Tell her I'll be there shortly. And Juliet? Keep an eye on Trinity. She looks ready to bolt. I'd barely reached the elevator when Anton caught up with me. Marissa, wait! That's Miss Clayton to you. I cut him off, stepping into the elevator. To my annoyance, he followed. You can't just walk in here and... Actually, I can. I own this company now. But don't worry, your position is safe. I smiled sweetly. For now. The elevator doors opened to reveal Trinity waiting in the hallway. Marissa, please, can we talk? Office hours are between 9 and 5. Schedule it with my assistant. I walked past her, but her next words stopped me cold. It's about Edgar. He's not who you think he is. I turned slowly. You have 2 minutes. Trinity glanced nervously at Anton, who stood watching us with clenched fists. Not here, not with him around. My office, now. I led them both inside, where Prudence was already waiting with a stack of folders. Well, isn't this cozy? Prudence remarked dryly. Shall I stay? Please do. I sat behind my desk, studying the 3 faces before me. Talk. Trinity took a shaky breath. Edgar's been manipulating company finances for years. Anton discovered it 6 months ago, but Edgar threatened to frame him if he spoke up. That's convenient, I said, opening one of Edgar's folders. Because according to these records, Anton's been doing some creative accounting himself. Those documents are fake, Anton snapped. Edgar set me up. Like you set me up 5 years ago? The words came out sharper than intended. That wasn't... Anton started, but my phone buzzed with another anonymous email. Check Prudence's laptop. Folder marked Project Phoenix. Password, Revenge 9985. I glanced at Prudence, who was suddenly very interested in her phone. Everyone out, I ordered. Except you, Prudence. We need to talk. As Anton and Trinity left, Xander appeared in the doorway. Bad time? Actually, your timing is perfect. Come in. I turned to Prudence. Would you mind if I borrowed your laptop? There's something I need to verify. She hesitated just a fraction too long. Of course not. Interesting, Xander mused, watching the exchange. You might want to see this first. He placed a USB drive on my desk. Security footage from last week shows some rather interesting late-night meetings between certain parties. My phone buzzed again. Don't trust anyone. Meeting tonight, 8 p.m., Carter's Cafe. Come alone. Prudence, I said carefully, why don't we reschedule our meeting? I'm sure you have plenty to handle with the transition. She gathered her things, face unreadable. Of course, but Marissa, remember who helped you rebuild when you had nothing? After she left, Xander leaned forward. You've stepped into a snake pit. So I'm gathering. The question is, which snake bit first? He smiled grimly. That's what makes it interesting, isn't it? By the way, Trinity's been trying to resign for months. Edgar wouldn't let her. Why? That's the million-dollar question. He stood to leave. Watch your back, Marissa. Not everyone here is what they seem. After he left, I opened my email to find another anonymous message. Prudence Hill has been working with Edgar for years. But that's not the worst of it. Tonight, I'll tell you everything. I stared at the message, then at the USB drive Xander had left. Something bigger was at play here, something that went beyond my personal vendetta against Anton and Trinity. Juliet poked her head in. Your next meeting's in 5 minutes. Also, Trinity left this for you. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a single photo from that family reunion 5 years ago. Me, Trinity, and Anton, all smiling. On the back was written, "Things aren't always what they seem. I'm sorry for more than you know." I tucked the photo into my desk drawer. 8 hours until my meeting with the anonymous emailer. 8 hours to decide who to trust. If anyone. Carter's Cafe was nearly empty when I arrived at 7:55 p.m. The barista pointed me toward a corner booth, where, to my surprise, Edgar sat nursing a coffee. You're the anonymous emailer? I slid into the seat across from him. No. He pushed a manila envelope across the table. But I know who is. And after tonight, so will you. Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Juliet. Urgent. Someone's accessing confidential files from Prudence's computer right now. Excuse me. I stood up, but Edgar grabbed my wrist. Wait. There's something you need to see first. He nodded toward the envelope. I sat back down and opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Prudence meeting with Edgar at various locations over the past year. Trinity looking terrified while Edgar handed her something. Anton and Prudence having what appeared to be a heated argument outside a restaurant. What is this? Insurance, Edgar said quietly. Against what's about to happen. My phone buzzed again. This time from an unknown number. Don't trust Edgar. Check the cafe's kitchen. I looked up sharply. Why did you really sell your company? Because... A crash from the kitchen interrupted him. We both turned to see Xander stumbling out, clutching his side. He's got a gun! Xander gasped, collapsing into a nearby chair. Back door! I ran toward the kitchen, pushing through the swinging doors, just in time to see a figure disappearing through the exit. On the floor lay a laptop, Prudence's laptop. Stop! I shouted, but by the time I reached the door, they were gone. My phone rang. Juliet again. Prudence just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. She's trying to contest the acquisition. I returned to find Edgar gone, and Xander making a call. Police are on their way, he said, wincing. Just got knocked around a bit, I'm fine. But you need to see what's on that laptop. We opened it to find a single document open, Project Phoenix. My hands shook as I read through emails between Prudence and Edgar dating back 6 years. Before my divorce. Before everything. They planned it all, I whispered. The divorce, the company sale, everything. Keep reading, Xander urged. The next email made my blood run cold. It was from Prudence to Edgar. Marissa's perfect for this. Once Anton leaves her, she'll be desperate enough to accept any help. We'll build her up just to take everything in the end. The ultimate revenge against her father for what he did to us. My father? What does he have to do with this? A lot, apparently. Trinity's voice made us both jump. She stood in the doorway, looking exhausted. I've been trying to tell you. Prudence and Edgar were business partners with your father 20 years ago. He caught them embezzling and turned them in. Edgar went to prison. Prudence lost everything. And you know this how? Xander asked. Because they've been blackmailing me with it. My father helped cover up their original crime. They threatened to expose him if I didn't help them get to you through Anton. My phone buzzed with another anonymous message. Now you know why. Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m., your office. Bring the laptop. The police will want to see this, Xander said. No, I replied firmly. Not yet. First, I want to hear what our mystery emailer has to say. I turned to Trinity. You're coming clean about everything tomorrow. No more secrets. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. Anton didn't either, not really. We were both just pawns in their game. Speaking of Anton, Xander checked his phone. He just texted me. Prudence called him in for a private meeting tonight. Let me guess. She's offering him a deal to testify against me at tomorrow's board meeting? Probably. What are you going to do? I picked up Prudence's laptop and the envelope of photos. I'm going to do what I should have done 5 years ago. Fight back. As if on cue, my phone lit up with texts from both Anton and Prudence. Anton, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Prudence, don't do anything rash, dear. Remember who your real friends are. I showed the messages to Xander and Trinity. Looks like everyone's choosing sides. And which side are you on? Xander asked carefully. I thought about the photos, the emails, the years of manipulation. I'm on the side of truth. Tomorrow morning, everything comes out. Every last dirty secret. Trinity touched my arm gently. Be careful. They've spent years planning this. So have I replied. I just didn't know it until now. As we left the cafe, police sirens wailing in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder, who would be left standing when the dust settled? The answer would come sooner than any of us expected. I arrived at my office at 6:45 a.m., coffee in hand, to find Anton already waiting outside my door. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, like he hadn't slept. Don't say anything, he blurted as I approached. Just look. He handed me his phone, showing a recording of his meeting with Prudence from the night before. In the video, Prudence sat behind her desk, calm and collected. It's simple, Anton. Either you help me take her down, or I release proof that you knew about the embezzlement all along. But I didn't know anything. Doesn't matter. I have documents that say you did. Your choice. I handed the phone back. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm done being their puppet. He ran a hand through his hair. What happened 5 years ago? It wasn't all what you think. Prudence approached me first, showed me fake evidence that you were stealing from the company. I was stupid enough to believe her. And Trinity? They used her to drive us apart. Said they'd destroy her father if she didn't play along. He checked his watch. She's meeting with the board right now, telling them everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Juliet. Prudence just arrived with 2 lawyers. Edgar's here too. Time to end this, I muttered, unlocking my office door. Inside, sitting calmly at my desk, was an elderly man I hadn't seen in 15 years. Hello, sweetheart, my father said quietly. What are you? I'm the anonymous emailer. He stood slowly. I've been tracking Prudence and Edgar for years, gathering evidence. When I heard they were targeting you, I had to act. You could have warned me 5 years ago, I said coldly. I tried. The night before Anton left, I came to your house. Prudence was there. She told you I was drunk, trying to cause trouble, remember? I did remember. I'd turned him away. The door burst open, and Xander rushed in. They're calling an emergency vote to remove you as CEO. Right now. Like hell they are. I grabbed Prudence's laptop and the envelope of photos. Dad, you coming? He smiled. Wouldn't miss it. The boardroom was packed. Prudence stood at the head of the table, Edgar beside her, both looking supremely confident. Trinity sat in the corner, pale but determined. The board members watched in confused silence as we entered. Perfect timing, Prudence smiled. We were just discussing your removal for corporate espionage. Funny, I set the laptop on the table. I was about to discuss yours. You can't prove anything, Edgar snapped. Actually, my father stepped forward, we can prove everything. Prudence's face went white. Richard, you're supposed to be dead? He smiled grimly. Sorry to disappoint. I've been watching you destroy lives for too long. I connected the laptop to the projector. Let's start with Project Phoenix, shall we? Your grand plan for revenge against my father by destroying his daughter? It's all lies, Prudence declared, but her voice shook. The police have copies of everything, Xander announced, including the recording of you threatening Anton last night. Trinity stood up. I've already given my statement about the blackmail. As have I, Edgar said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I'm tired, he continued. Prudence, it's over. I already signed a full confession this morning. You what? Prudence shrieked, lunging for him. 2 security guards I hadn't noticed stepped forward to restrain her. The SEC has been investigating for months, my father explained. Edgar chose to cooperate in exchange for leniency. I turned to the board members. Every document is in the folders in front of you. Take your time reviewing them. I'll be in my office. As I turned to leave, Prudence called out, You have no idea what your father did to us. No, I replied, but I know what you did to me. The difference is, I'm choosing to end the cycle of revenge. Back in my office, Anton waited with Juliet. The police are here, Juliet announced. They want statements from everyone. Tell them we're ready, I looked at Anton. All of us. He nodded. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, for everything. I know. I surprised myself by meaning it. We were all manipulated, but it ends today. My father touched my shoulder. You did good, kid. Better than I ever did. We're not done yet, I said, watching through my office window as Prudence was led away in handcuffs. The real work, rebuilding trust, healing relationships, that's just beginning. Speaking of which, Juliet interrupted, the board wants to meet again tomorrow. Something about discussing the company's new direction. I smiled. Tell them I look forward to it. After all, this company was built on empowerment and second chances. Maybe it's time we lived up to that. As everyone filed out to talk to the police, I sat at my desk, looking at that old photo Trinity had given me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's breaking free from the cycle that trapped you in the first place. My phone buzzed one last time. Proud of you, daughter. Coffee soon? For the first time in years, I replied, yes. The morning after Prudence's arrest, I found Trinity waiting in my office, clutching a thick manila folder. There's more, she said without preamble. Prudence kept records of everything. I found these in her private safe after the police left. I took the folder, my coffee forgotten on the desk. Inside were photos, documents, and emails dating back 20 years. How did you get into her safe? She made me memorize the combination years ago. Insurance, she called it. Trinity's hands trembled. But that's not the worst part. Look at the last page. The document was dated just 3 days ago. A contract between Prudence and someone named Marcus, agreeing to transfer millions in company assets to offshore accounts. Who's Marcus? I asked. That would be me, a voice said from the doorway. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped in, followed by Xander. Marcus Reynolds, FBI. We've been tracking Prudence's network for years. You're kidding, I said flatly. I wish. Xander closed the door. Marcus contacted me 6 months ago. That's why I've been playing both sides. My phone buzzed. A text from Anton. Don't trust Marcus. Meeting in parking garage now. Urgent. Excuse me, I stood up. I need some air. Trinity grabbed my arm. Don't go alone. I'll be fine. Just keep our guests entertained. The parking garage was dim and eerily quiet. Anton stood by my car, looking nervous. "Marcus isn't FBI," he said as soon as I approached. "He's Prudence's son." "What?" "That's why she did all this. Not just revenge against your father. She was building an empire for her son. I found proof in Edgar's office last night." A car engine roared to life somewhere in the garage. "We need to go." Anton grabbed my hand. "Now." We ran toward the exit, but a black SUV screeched to a stop in front of us. Marcus stepped out, pointing a gun. "Going somewhere?" "Actually, yes." Juliet's voice rang out as she emerged from behind a pillar, phone held high. "And this is all being live-streamed to the real FBI." Marcus spun around, but it was too late. Police cars flooded the garage, lights flashing. "Drop the weapon!" an officer shouted. Back in my office an hour later, I watched Marcus being led away in handcuffs while Detective Sarah Rivera took our statements. "We've been building this case for months," she explained. "Prudence's network goes deeper than anyone realized. Marcus was handling all the international accounts." "But how did you know he'd be here today?" I asked. Juliet grinned. "Remember that security system upgrade I insisted on last week? Every conversation in this building has been monitored by the FBI. And I've been feeding them information," Xander added. "The real FBI approached me long before Marcus did." Trinity sat heavily in a chair. "So it's really over?" "Almost," my father said, walking in. "There's still the matter of the board meeting in an hour. They'll want answers." "They'll get them," I promised. "Complete transparency from now on." Anton cleared his throat. "About that, there's something else you should know. The night I left, Prudence showed me documents proving that your father was embezzling from his company." "Those were forgeries," my father interrupted. "But they were convincing enough that even I questioned my own records for a while." "That's why you disappeared," I realized. "You were gathering evidence to clear your name." "And to protect you, though I failed at that part." "No," I touched his arm. "You helped end it. That counts for something." My phone buzzed with a message from the board. "Meeting moved up. 15 minutes. "Ready to face them?" Juliet asked. Actually, I looked around the room at Anton, Trinity, my father, and the others. "I think we all need to face them. Together." The boardroom fell silent as we filed in. I took my place at the head of the table, the others flanking me. "Before we begin," I addressed the board, "you should know that everything that's happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly, has taught me something crucial about leadership. It's not about revenge or power. It's about breaking cycles of hurt and creating something better." "And how do you propose to do that?" one board member asked. I smiled. "By telling you the whole truth from the beginning. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. Just honest business focused on genuine empowerment." "Starting with this," Anton stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "My resignation, but also my full cooperation with any investigation." Trinity placed another folder beside it. "Mine too, along with everything I know about Prudence's operations." The board members exchanged looks. "Well," the chairman finally spoke, "it seems we have a lot to discuss." "Yes," I agreed, "we do. And this time, we're going to do it right." As the meeting began, I caught my father's proud smile from across the room. Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't exposing the truth. It's learning to trust again after the truth comes out. "You need to see this." Juliet burst into my office 2 days after the board meeting, waving a tablet. "Prudence's prison call logs. She's been contacting someone every hour on the hour." I took the tablet, scanning the numbers. "These are all international calls. To a private bank in Switzerland," Xander added, walking in. "The FBI traced them. There's still money missing. Millions." My father appeared in the doorway. "And I think I know where it is." He held up an old photograph. "Remember your mother's art gallery? The one that mysteriously burned down when I was 12? I stood up. "What about it?" Men, it didn't burn down by accident. Prudence arranged it. Insurance fraud. Your mother's signature was forged on documents transferring ownership of several paintings to a private collector. Let me guess, I said. The collector was Marcus. Close. It was his father. My father placed the photo on my desk. Prudence's first husband. Trinity rushed in, breathless. Anton's gone. What do you mean, gone? He left this morning for a meeting with the FBI and never showed up. His phone's off, and his apartment's been cleared out. My phone rang. Detective Rivera. Anton just turned himself in, she said without preamble. He's offering evidence about art forgeries dating back 20 years. Says it involves your mother's gallery. I put the phone on speaker. We were just discussing that. What kind of evidence? Shipping manifests, bank transfers, insurance claims. He says Prudence has been using forged artwork as collateral for loans. The real paintings are in a vault somewhere. Switzerland, Xander cut in. That's what the calls are about. She's trying to move them. I know where, my father said quietly. Your mother told me before she died. There's a private vault in Geneva. She discovered it right before the gallery fire. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because Prudence threatened to hurt you if I did. After your mother's death, I couldn't risk it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Vault 247, passcode 031285. Hurry. That's my birthday, I whispered. It's a trap, Juliet warned. Probably, I agreed, but it's also our only lead. I'm coming with you, Trinity declared. We all are, Xander added. Detective Rivera's voice crackled through the speaker. I can have Interpol meet you there. When do you want to move? I looked at my father. How fast can you get us to Switzerland? My private jet's fueled and ready. I've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. 6 hours later, we stood outside the private vault facility in Geneva. Interpol agents positioned themselves discreetly around the building, while Detective Rivera coordinated with local authorities. Ready? My father asked. I entered the code. The vault door clicked open. Inside, instead of paintings, we found Marcus sitting calmly at a table. Took you long enough, he smiled. Mother said you'd figure it out eventually. Where are the paintings? I demanded. Safe, like Anton, like everything else we've worked for. It's over, Marcus. Detective Rivera stepped in, gun drawn. We have Anton's evidence. Do you? He slid a phone across the table. Call him. I dialed Anton's number. A phone rang somewhere in the building. Down here! Trinity called from the hallway. We found Anton in another vault, tied to a chair, but unharmed. I'm sorry, he said as we untied him. They grabbed me outside the FBI office. Marcus said he'd hurt Trinity if I didn't cooperate. The paintings? My father pressed. In there. Anton pointed to a large safe. But you need Prudence's fingerprint to open it. No, I smiled. We don't. I pulled out the photo my father had shown me earlier. We just need this. What's so special about that photo? Marcus demanded. Look at the frame, my father said. Your mother's fingerprints, preserved in the original varnish, from the day she stole it from my wife's gallery. Detective Rivera held up a portable scanner. Shall we? The safe clicked open, revealing dozens of carefully wrapped paintings. My mother's collection, I breathed. All of it. And proof of every fraud Prudence ever committed, my father added. She kept records with each painting. Marcus lunged for the door, but Xander was faster, tackling him to the ground. You know what the funny thing is? I told Marcus as Interpol agents cuffed him. None of this was necessary. 20 years of revenge, manipulation, and crime. For what? The gallery was already successful. The paintings were already valuable. You don't understand, he spat. It was never about the money. It was about making your family suffer like mine did. No, my father said quietly. It was about your mother's bitterness destroying everything she touched, including you. As we watched Marcus being led away, Trinity touched my arm. What happens now? I looked at the paintings, at Anton's apologetic face, at my father's tired eyes. Now we restore what was stolen, not just the art, but the truth. And then we move forward. Together? She asked hesitantly. Together, I confirmed. All of us. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in vaults. They're found in the moments when truth finally sets everyone free. 1 month after the Switzerland incident, I stood in my mother's restored gallery, now filled with the recovered paintings. The grand reopening was scheduled for tomorrow, but tonight was just for family, whatever that meant now. The insurance company finally settled, Juliet announced, handing me a check. Full value of the original claim, plus 20 years of interest. Donate it, I decided, to art education programs. Mom would have liked that. Speaking of donations, Trinity walked in carrying a large canvas. Look what I found in Anton's storage unit. My breath caught. It was my mother's self-portrait, the one I thought had burned in the fire. She was beautiful, Anton said softly from the doorway. I've been keeping it safe since that night. Prudence ordered me to destroy it, but I couldn't. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't deserve your forgiveness yet. He stepped forward. Maybe I still don't. That's not your call to make, my father interrupted, joining us. Forgiveness isn't earned, it's given. Your mother taught me that, he added, looking at me. The gallery door chimed. Detective Rivera entered with a thick folder. Prudence's sentencing is tomorrow, she announced, but there's something you should see first. She laid out several photographs on a nearby table. These were found in Marcus's apartment. The photos showed my mother with Marcus's father, laughing, embracing. They were having an affair, Detective Rivera explained, until your mother ended it and married your father instead. So this whole thing, I started, was Prudence's revenge for a love triangle from 30 years ago, my father finished. She married Marcus's father on the rebound, then spent decades plotting her revenge after he died. That's insane, Trinity whispered. That's human, Xander corrected, examining one of the photos. Love and hate are closer than we think. My phone buzzed. A message from the prison. Prudence requests a meeting before tomorrow's sentencing. Don't go, Anton warned. She's manipulative until the end. I have to, I replied. For closure. Then we're coming with you, Trinity declared. The prison visiting room was cold and sterile. Prudence sat waiting, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. My, quite the audience, she remarked as we all filed in. Say what you need to say, I told her. I just wanted you to know I did love your mother once. We were friends before she met Marcus's father. Before she stole him from me. She didn't steal anyone, my father cut in. She made a choice. A choice that destroyed lives, Prudence snapped. I lost everything. No, I leaned forward. You threw everything away. Every relationship, every opportunity for happiness. You poisoned it all with revenge. And what about you? She challenged. Aren't you here for revenge too? I'm here for truth. There's a difference. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is, you're just like me. We both built companies from nothing after betrayal. But that's where the similarity ends, Trinity spoke up. Marissa built something real. You just built more lies. Prudence's face hardened. You ungrateful little... That's enough, Detective Rivera interrupted. Time's up. As we turned to leave, Prudence called out, The paintings aren't worth what you think. I turned back. They're worth exactly what my mother always said. They're worth the truth they tell. And now, finally, they're telling the whole story. Back at the gallery, we gathered around my mother's self-portrait. Where should we hang it? Juliet asked. Right here, I pointed to the entrance wall, where everyone can see it first. No more hiding. To truth. Anton raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings, Trinity added. To family, my father said, putting his arm around me. The one we choose. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from the board. Emergency meeting tomorrow after the sentencing. Time to discuss the company's future. They want to know if you're keeping Anton and Trinity on, Xander guessed. No, I smiled. They want to know if I'm accepting the chairperson position. Apparently, running 2 successful companies while exposing a decades-old conspiracy makes for a pretty impressive resume. And are you? Juliet asked. I looked around at these people, who had become my strange, complicated family, at the paintings that told our story of loss, betrayal, and redemption. Yes, I decided, but on one condition: we do it together. All of us. Even me? Anton asked quietly. And especially you, because the only way to truly break a cycle of revenge is to build something better in its place. As we raised our cups to toast the future, I caught my reflection in my mother's portrait. For the first time in years, I recognized her smile in my own. Tomorrow would bring Prudence's sentencing, a gallery opening, and a new chapter for the company. But tonight was about something simpler: the quiet victory of choosing love over revenge, truth over deception, and family over everything else. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, but only if you're willing to let go of revenge altogether. The gavel struck with finality as the judge delivered Prudence's sentence: 20 years without parole. As the courtroom cleared, Detective Rivera handed me an envelope. Found this in Marcus's apartment. Thought you should have it. Inside was a letter from my mother to Prudence, dated just days before the gallery fire. I forgive you. Whatever happens next, remember that. My hands trembled as I read it. She knew what Prudence was planning. Your mother always saw the best in people, my father said softly, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. The gallery opening was scheduled for that evening. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Ms. Clayton, what's next for Empower Solutions? Will Anton remain with the company? Any comment on Prudence's sentencing? I faced the cameras. Tonight isn't about business or revenge. It's about art, truth, and second chances. Join us at the gallery opening and see for yourself. Trinity touched my arm. Prudence asked to see you one last time. No, I said firmly. Her story with us is finished. It's time to write our own. The gallery hummed with excitement that evening. Art collectors, business leaders, and media filled the rooms, but my attention was on the small group gathered around my mother's self-portrait. I remember when she painted this, Anton said quietly. She told me to keep it safe, no matter what happened. I didn't understand then. But you protected it anyway, I replied. That counts for something. Speaking of protection, Xander approached with a tablet. The board just voted unanimously. The merger's complete, and they've approved your new leadership structure. All of it? Trinity asked. All of it. Joint leadership, profit sharing with employees, the education foundation, everything. My father raised his glass. To new beginnings. Wait, Juliet interrupted. There's something else you need to see first. She led us to a hidden panel behind my mother's portrait. Inside was a small journal and a USB drive. Your mother left instructions, my father explained. This was only to be opened when the paintings returned home. The journal contained detailed accounts of everything: the affair, Prudence's initial threats, the insurance fraud scheme. But it was the final entry that caught my breath. To my daughter, don't let bitterness win. Success isn't about revenge. It's about rising above what broke you. Build something beautiful from the ashes. The USB drive contained video messages, my mother speaking directly to camera, documenting her suspicions and hopes for the future. Play the last one, Trinity urged. My mother's face filled the screen, her smile exactly as I remembered. Say, if you're watching this, the truth has finally come out. Remember that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest choice you can make. And Marissa, darling, I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Tears streamed down my face as the video ended. Anton squeezed my shoulder. She was right, about everything. I know. I wiped my eyes. Which is why we're doing this right. I climbed onto a nearby chair, clinking my glass for attention. Welcome, everyone. Tonight isn't just about recovering stolen art. It's about recovering lost truths and broken relationships. This gallery will now house the Restoration Foundation, dedicated to supporting artists and healing through art therapy. Applause filled the room. Additionally, I continued, Empower Solutions and the former Hoffman Industries will merge under a new name, Phoenix Rising Partners. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is rise above our past and help others do the same. Trinity stepped forward. The Foundation's first project launches next week, art therapy programs in women's prisons. Including where Prudence is, Anton added quietly. Especially there, I nodded. Because healing has to start somewhere. As the crowd dispersed to explore the gallery, Detective Rivera approached with news. Marcus took a plea deal. He's giving up everything he knows about the international art fraud ring. Good, my father said. Let him find his own path to redemption. Juliet appeared with contracts. Ready to make it official? I looked at our unlikely family, Anton, Trinity, Xander, my father, Juliet, each carrying their own stories of redemption. Actually, I set down the contracts. First, I want to show you something. I led them to a new painting I'd commissioned, a phoenix rising from ashes, but looking back with compassion at its former self. This is who we are now, I said, not defined by what broke us, but by how we chose to rebuild. Together, Trinity added. Together, we all echoed. The gallery lights dimmed, highlighting the paintings that had sparked so much pain and healing. My mother's portrait seemed to smile down at us, her final message echoing in my heart. Success isn't about revenge. It's about rising above what broke you. And that's exactly what we did.
The banging on my front door started at exactly 3:17 a.m. I know because I'd been staring at my phone for hours, watching Andre's on my way message collect dust since 8 p.m. 3 loud knocks, a pause, then 2 more. My heart jumped into my throat. I'm Yolanda, and until that moment, I thought I knew what my life was. Financial analyst, loving wife, daughter of the greatest poker player I'd ever known. Funny how quickly labels can peel away. Mrs. Burton, a gravelly voice carried through the door. We know you're home. Cars in the driveway. I crept to the peephole, my bare feet silent against the hardwood. 2 men stood outside, one tall and lean with silver-streaked hair, the other built like a linebacker. Both wore expensive suits that didn't quite hide their rough edges. Andre's not here, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The silver-haired man, Russell, I'd later learn, chuckled. Oh, we know that, sweetheart. But see, Andre owes us quite a bit of money, and since you're his wife. My fingers trembled as I opened Andre's text messages. 6 months of working late excuses, mysterious weekend business trips, all lies. I don't know anything about any money, I said, my mind racing to the joint account I'd checked just yesterday. The one that should have held our life savings, the one that now showed a balance of $1342. $300,000, the linebacker said, plus interest. The number hit me like a physical blow. I slid down the wall, my legs giving out. That's impossible. Your husband's quite the optimist, Russell said. Always thought the next bet would turn things around. Check your bedroom closet, Mrs. Burton. Behind the shoe rack, there's an envelope. I ran upstairs, my heart pounding. The envelope was there, tucked behind my winter boots. Inside, a single sheet of paper with Andre's messy scrawl. I had no choice. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me. Found it, didn't you? Russell called up. We'll be back tomorrow night. Same time. Have a plan for our money, or things get uncomfortable. Their footsteps retreated. I heard car doors slam, An engine start. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Lacey. "You okay? Just saw a black SUV leave your driveway." I couldn't answer. Instead, I sat on my closet floor, surrounded by Andre's empty hangers, and remembered my father's voice from years ago. "Baby girl," he'd said, shuffling his ever-present deck of cards. In poker and in life, there are two kinds of players: those who fold when they're dealt a bad hand, and those who learn to play it anyway. Dad had been the best poker player in 3 states. He'd taught me everything he knew before cancer took him last year. Andre had been at the funeral, holding my hand, promising to always be there. Another lie. My phone buzzed again. "Lacey, I'm coming over." "No," I texted back. "I'm fine. Talk tomorrow." I wasn't fine. I was terrified, angry, and something else. Something that felt dangerously like my father's steel-eyed focus before a big game. I went to my office and booted up my laptop. First, I checked our other accounts, all drained. Credit cards, maxed out. Then I started searching for Andre's digital footprints, social media, email, phone records. He'd vanished like smoke. But he'd taught me one thing during our 5 years together. Everyone leaves traces. You just have to know where to look. The sun was rising when I found my first lead. A poker forum Andre had been active on. His username was subtle, but I recognized his writing style. He'd been in contact with someone called Sandstorm about underground games. I opened my bottom desk drawer and pulled out Dad's old deck of cards. The familiar feel of worn cardstock against my fingers brought back hours of lessons at our kitchen table. "Every tell has a tell," Dad would say. "Every player has a weakness. Your job is to find it before they find yours." I started shuffling, muscle memory taking over. My hands stopped shaking. $300,000. The bookies would be back in less than 24 hours. I had 2 options: fold or play. I thought of Andre's note. I had no choice. There's always a choice. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Someone who knew computers the way my father knew cards. "Poppy, it's Yolanda. Remember how you always said you owed me one? I need your help." The cards whispered against each other as I shuffled, and for the first time since the knocking started, I smiled. Game on. Poppy hadn't changed much in 10 years. Same wild red hair, same mischievous glint in her eyes, same tendency to type faster than she talked. She sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by laptops and energy drink cans, while I paced. "You really married a moron," she said, fingers flying across keyboards. "He used the same password for everything. Everything. Can you find him?" "Already did. Your boy's in Macau." She spun one laptop around. "Used his credit card at the airport 3 days ago. But that's not the interesting part." I stopped pacing. "What is?" "The interesting part is what I found in his email drafts. Come look at this." I knelt beside her, scanning the screen. Dozens of spreadsheets, each filled with names, dates, and numbers. My stomach turned when I recognized some of the names. Local business owners, a city council member, even a judge. "These are all people who owe them money?" I asked. "Better. These are people who've been paying them money. Look at the patterns." Poppy highlighted several rows. Monthly payments, always the same amount. "This isn't gambling debt, it's protection money." A sharp knock at the door made us both jump. I checked my phone. 3:17 a.m. again, right on schedule. "Hide," I whispered to Poppy. She grabbed her laptops and disappeared into the kitchen. I opened the door to find Russell and his linebacker friend. "Evening, Mrs. Burton. Ready to discuss payment options." "Come in." I stepped aside, my heart racing but my voice steady. "Would you like coffee?" Russell raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the invitation. How hospitable. "Black, 2 sugars." I led them to the living room, where I'd set up my father's old poker table. 3 cups of coffee waited, steam rising in the dim light. "Interesting choice of furniture," Russell said, running his fingers along the felt. "It was my father's, Sylvester Gross. You might have heard of him." The linebacker's eyes widened slightly. Russell's smile tightened. The silver fox? That was your father. The very same. I sat down, gesturing for them to join me. So about Andre's debt. 300,000, Russell said, plus 20% interest. That's quite a sum. I took a sip of coffee, almost as impressive as your protection racket. Russell's hand froze halfway to his cup. Excuse me? I pulled out my phone and opened the files Poppy had sent me. Would you like to see your spreadsheets? The ones detailing payments from Judge Matthews, or maybe Councilman Peters. Where did you get those? The linebacker started to stand, but Russell held up a hand. Careful, Mrs. Burton. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm my father's daughter. Games are what I do best. I met his gaze. Here's my offer. You write off Andre's debt, and these files stay private. Russell laughed, but there was no humor in it. Or I could have my friend here take your phone and break your fingers. You could, I agreed. But then the encrypted files, already sent to 3 different news outlets, would automatically decrypt at noon tomorrow. Plus, I imagine the FBI would be very interested in the offshore accounts I found. From the kitchen, I heard the faint sound of Poppy's typing. Right on cue, Russell's phone buzzed. He checked it, his face darkening. Just sent you a sample, I said. Consider it a preview. Russell stood slowly, straightening his jacket. You have no idea what you're getting into. Actually, I do. I'm getting into the same game you are, just playing it better. I stood as well. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. After that, I start showing my cards. This isn't over, Russell said, moving toward the door. The linebacker followed, cracking his knuckles meaningfully. One more thing, I called after them. Touch me or anyone I know, and everything releases immediately. I learned about dead man's switches from the best. The door slammed behind them. My legs turned to jelly, and I collapsed onto the couch. Poppy emerged from the kitchen, grinning. That was badass. But you know they're not going to just give up, right? Of course not. I pulled out my father's cards and started shuffling. That's why we're going to Plan B, which is, I dealt 2 hands face down. We're going to find every game Andre played in, every player he lost to, every dealer who watched him lose. I flipped over my cards, pocket aces, and we're going to follow the money all the way to the top. Poppy picked up her cards and smiled. You know what? I think I missed you. Good, because I need your help with one more thing. I reached for my laptop. Tell me everything you know about underground poker apps. As Poppy launched into an explanation about encrypted messaging and digital currencies, I felt my father's presence in the room. Almost heard his voice. The best players don't just play the cards, baby girl. They play the people holding them. I was counting on it. The underground poker room smelled like expensive cigars and cheap desperation. I adjusted my wig, a sleek black bob that Poppy insisted made me look dangerous, and counted my chips. $20,000, borrowed from my sister Lacey, after I'd promised her it wasn't for anything illegal. Technically, I hadn't lied. Poker itself wasn't illegal. Everything else about this place was. Martini, miss? A young server appeared at my elbow. His name tag read Dean. Vodka tonic, I said, using the code phrase Poppy had discovered on the forums. With a twist of fate, Dean's eyes flickered with recognition. Right this way. He led me past the main gaming floor to a private room in the back. 5 players sat around a felt-topped table, with one empty seat waiting. Russell occupied the dealer's position, shuffling cards with practiced precision. Well, well, he said, looking up. What's your name, sweetheart? Diana, I replied, using the alias Poppy had created, complete with a digital background that would hold up to any quick searches. I heard this was where the real games happen. You heard right. Russell gestured to the empty chair. 10,000 minimum buy-in. I counted out my chips, feeling the weight of the hidden camera in my necklace. Poppy was watching everything from her van outside, recording every face, every transaction. The first few hands went exactly as planned. I played cautiously, lost small pots, One smaller ones. Let them think I was just another rich thrill seeker out of her depth. Raise 20,000, said the man to my left. A sweaty developer I recognized from Andre's spreadsheets. I looked at my cards again, Queen and Jack of Hearts. The flop showed the 10 and King of Hearts, one card away from a royal flush. Call, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. The turn card was the 9 of clubs. Useless. All in, the developer announced, pushing his chips forward. I touched my father's old ring, now serving as my good luck charm. He'd taught me this exact scenario. When someone bets big on a draw, he'd said, they're usually holding air and hoping you'll fold. Call, I said, pushing in my remaining chips. The river card came. Ace of Hearts. The developer's face fell as I revealed my royal flush. As I raked in the chips, I caught Russell studying me with newfound intensity. Impressive, he said. Your play style reminds me of someone my father taught me, I replied truthfully. He was old school. Was. Cancer. Also true. The best lies, Dad always said. Stick close to the truth. 3 hours and several strategic wins later, my chip stack had tripled. I was about to call it a night when Dean appeared again. Phone call for you, Mr. Russell. Says it's urgent. Russell excused himself. Through my earpiece, I heard Poppy whisper, that's our distraction. Check his office now. I waited 2 hands, then stood. Powder room? Dean pointed me down a hallway. As soon as I was out of sight, I slipped into Russell's office. The door was locked, but Poppy had prepared me for that. 10 seconds with the electronic lock picker, and I was in. The office was minimal. Just a desk, computer, and filing cabinet. I plugged Poppy's USB drive into the computer, letting it do its work. 30 seconds to copy everything. Someone's coming. Poppy's voice crackled in my ear. I yanked out the drive and turned to leave, but the door was already opening. Dean stood there, eyes wide. You shouldn't be in here, he said, but made no move to raise an alarm. Neither should you, I replied, studying his face, young, nervous, with something like guilt in his eyes. I know who you are, he said quietly. You're Andre's wife. My blood froze. Are you going to tell Russell? Dean glanced over his shoulder, then stepped into the office, closing the door. No, but you need to be careful. Russell, he doesn't just break kneecaps anymore. Last guy who crossed him disappeared. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen what they do to people. And because, he swallowed hard. Andre wasn't the only one they trapped. Some of us didn't have a choice. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dean quickly opened the door. Bathroom's the next door over, ma'am, he said loudly. I slipped past him, heart pounding. When I returned to the table, Russell was back, watching me with those calculating eyes. Leaving so soon? He asked as I collected my chips. Quit while you're ahead, that's my motto. I smiled. All confidence on the outside, while my insides trembled. Smart girl, he said. We'll see you again soon, I hope. It wasn't a hope, it was a threat. As I left the club, Dean caught my eye one last time. His look was clear. Be careful. I touched my father's ring again. Careful wasn't part of the plan anymore. You've lost your mind, Lacey said, pacing my kitchen. Completely lost it. First the money, now this? She waved the USB drive like it was radioactive. Do you know what Russell did to the Martinez family when they couldn't pay? I know exactly what he did, I replied, watching Poppy work her magic on my laptop. That's why we're doing this. We. Lacey threw up her hands. There shouldn't be a we. There shouldn't be anything except you calling the police. Got it, Poppy interrupted, spinning the laptop around. You're going to want to see this. The screen showed a series of emails between Russell and someone called Badge 647. My stomach dropped as I read through them. They've got a cop on payroll, Poppy explained, highlighting key passages. Detective Marcus Wright. He's been burying evidence, tipping them off about raids. Lacey stopped pacing. That's why nobody can touch them. It gets worse. Poppy continued typing. Look at these payment records. They're not just running poker games. They're laundering money through half the businesses in town. A knock at the door made us all freeze. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Dean stood outside, looking nervous. "What's he doing here?" Lacey hissed. "Only one way to find out." I opened the door, keeping the security chain on. "Yes, Russell knows," Dean blurted out. "Someone saw you with the USB drive. He's on his way, right now." I yanked him inside and locked the door. "Poppy, pack up. Lacey, get your car ready." "No time," Dean said. "They're all ready." Headlights swept across the windows as 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. "Back door," I ordered, grabbing my laptop and the USB drive. We rushed through the kitchen just as someone started pounding on the front door. "Mrs. Burton," Russell's voice carried through the house. "Let's have a chat about computer privacy." We slipped out the back just as the front door splintered open. Lacey's car was parked in the alley, thank God. We piled in, me in front, Poppy and Dean in back. "Drive," I commanded. Lacey floored it. "They're following," Poppy reported, looking back. 2 cars. "Call Detective Santos," I told Lacey. "The one from Dad's poker nights. Tell her everything." "You know a clean cop?" Dean asked, ducking as a car behind us accelerated. "Dad always said, keep one ace up your sleeve." I gripped the dashboard as Lacey took a sharp turn. He played poker with her every Thursday for 15 years. The SUVs were gaining. One pulled alongside us, trying to force us toward the curb. "Left," I shouted. "Take the bridge." Lacey swerved onto the bridge approach. "They're going to trap us." "That's the plan." I pulled out my phone and opened the files Poppy had copied. "Poppy now." She hit a button on her laptop. Suddenly, every digital billboard on the bridge lit up with Russell's spreadsheets, names, dates, amounts, including Detective Wright's payments. "What did you do?" Dean whispered. "Created a spectacle." Poppy grinned. "Those billboards are streaming live to every news station in the city." The SUVs behind us slowed, then stopped. Through the rear window, I saw Russell standing in the street, phone to his ear, watching his empire implode on screens 50 feet high. "Police units are converging on the bridge," Lacey reported, still on the phone with Detective Santos. "They want us to pull over at the north end." 5 minutes later, we sat in Detective Santos's office, watching the chaos unfold on TV. Russell and his men were in custody. Detective Wright was being led out of the precinct in handcuffs. The news was calling it the biggest corruption bust in city history. "Your father would be proud," Detective Santos said, setting down 4 cups of coffee, "and probably terrified. You took one hell of a risk." "Speaking of risks," Dean spoke up, "what about me? They'll know I helped." "Witness protection," Detective Santos replied. "If you're willing to testify." Dean nodded slowly. Yeah, I am." My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. My heart stopped when I opened it. "What is it?" Lacey asked. "Andre." I showed them the screen. "He's in custody in Macau. They're extraditing him." "Are you okay?" Lacey put her arm around me. I thought about the last few weeks, the fear, the anger, the rush of outsmarting Russell at his own game. I thought about Andre's note. I had no choice. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. "I really am." "So what now?" Poppy asked. I pulled out my father's deck of cards and started shuffling. The familiar motion felt different now, less like comfort and more like victory. "Now," I said, "we make sure this never happens to anyone else." Detective Santos smiled. "Deal me in." The holding cell smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Andre sat across from me, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame, looking smaller than I remembered. 3 weeks in a Macau detention center had hollowed his cheeks and darkened the circles under his eyes. "You look different," he said, studying my face. "The hair, a lot's different." I placed my father's deck of cards on the metal table between us. "Start talking." "Yolanda, not about us. About Russell's operation. Every game, every player, every corrupt cop you know about. I started dealing cards, the way Dad taught me to keep my hands steady during tough conversations. Detective Santos needs everything. Andre watched the cards fall. They'll kill me. They're going to prison. The question is how long you'll join them. I dealt the final card. Your choice. He picked up his cards, muscle memory, from countless games at our kitchen table. I never meant for any of this to happen. The first time I lost big, Russell offered to let me deal for him instead of breaking my legs, said I could work off the debt. And it worked, at first. But then he started asking for more, said I had to bring in new players, wealthy ones. If they lost big, he'd force them to launder money through their businesses. Andre's hands shook. When I tried to quit, he threatened you. So you ran. I thought if I disappeared, they'd leave you alone. He looked up, eyes wet. How did you do it? Take them down? I gathered the cards back into the deck. I played the game better than they did. Your father would be... Don't. I cut him off. Don't talk about my father. A guard knocked on the window, signaling 5 minutes left. Detective Santos is offering you a deal, I said, standing. Full cooperation for a reduced sentence. Witness protection after. What about you? Andre asked. What happens to us? I touched my wedding ring. Still there, though I wasn't sure why. There is no us anymore. There's just what you owe. Not to me, to everyone Russell hurt because of people like you. I'll do it, he said quickly. I'll tell them everything. Good. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. The money you lost, was it really 300,000? Andre's face fell. 450. Russell lied about the amount because he thought it would be easier to squeeze you for the smaller sum. I nodded, adding this to my mental ledger. Goodbye, Andre. Outside, Poppy waited in her van, surrounded by monitors. How'd it go? He'll talk. I slid into the passenger seat. What's happening at the club? Police are still cataloging evidence, but look what they found. She pulled up a video feed. On screen, officers were removing stacks of cash from behind a false wall. Over $2 million in cash. And that's just the beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from Dean. Meeting set for tonight. You sure about this? Are you? Poppy asked, reading over my shoulder. I thought about Andre's confession, about the real amount he'd lost, about all the other people Russell had trapped in his web. Russell's operation wasn't just about poker, I said. The games were just the hook. The real money was in forcing people to launder cash through their businesses, which means there are more clubs, more operations. Russell was middle management, at best. I texted Dean back. Yes, I'm sure. Poppy started the van. Detective Santos won't like this. Detective Santos doesn't need to know. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted messaging app Dean had shown me. Besides, we're not doing anything illegal. Right, Poppy snorted. We're just infiltrating more underground poker clubs to find evidence of money laundering. Totally legal. The poker's legal. The evidence gathering is creative. My phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number with an address and a time. Below it, 3 words. Bring big money. You don't have to do this, Poppy said softly. Russell's done. Andre's cooperating. You won. I thought about the look in Andre's eyes when he confessed the real amount, about Dean's stories of other victims, about my father's voice in my head. The game's not over until you understand why you're playing. This was never about winning, I replied. It's about making sure nobody else loses everything to people like Russell. Okay. Poppy pulled up a satellite view of the address. But we do this smart. No risks, like last time. I touched my father's ring, feeling its familiar weight. No promises. The sun was setting as we drove across town, painting the sky the color of old playing cards. Somewhere out there, bigger players were running bigger games, ruining more lives. Time to ante up. The new club made Russell's look like a church bingo night. Located in the penthouse of an abandoned office building, it screamed old money and new crimes. Dean met me in the lobby, wearing a server's uniform that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "They're all here," he whispered, leading me to the private elevator. "Every major player in the region. Names? Better, I got photos." He slipped me a phone. "Hidden camera in the service entrance. Poppy should be receiving them now." The elevator opened directly into what looked like a James Bond movie set. Crystal chandeliers, leather furniture, and at least 20 tables of high-stakes games in progress. My hidden camera necklace was already recording everything. "Miss Diana," a smooth voice called out. "We've been expecting you." The man approaching made Russell look like a small-time hustler, Thomas Price, according to Dean's intel, the real power behind the operation. "Your reputation precedes you," he said, taking my hand. "The woman who brought down Russell's operation, though I believe that's not your real name." My heart stopped, but my poker face held. "I'm afraid you're mistaken." "Am I?" He smiled, all teeth and threat. "Let's discuss it over a game." The high-stakes table just opened up, a trap, obviously, but one I had to walk into. Lead the way. The table's other players were exactly who we'd hoped to find: a corrupt judge, 2 city officials, and a real estate developer known for mysterious building fires, all part of the money laundering network we'd uncovered in Russell's files. $1 million minimum, Price announced, sitting down. "Cash only." I opened my briefcase, filled with marked bills, courtesy of Detective Santos, though Price didn't need to know that. "Deal me in." 3 hours later, my stack had doubled. I'd played cautiously, letting others take the big risks, while I gathered intel through seemingly casual conversation. The hidden microphone caught everything. "Impressive discipline," Price commented during a break. "You remind me of someone, a player from years ago. Sylvester, I believe." "Common name," I replied, but my hand tightened on my cards. "Indeed." Though his daughter might disagree. Before I could respond, Dean appeared at my shoulder. "Sir, there's a situation in the kitchen." "Excuse me." Price stood. "Don't go anywhere, Diana. Or should I say, Yolanda." As soon as he left, Dean whispered, "You've got to get out. Now." They found the transmitter in my uniform. "The evidence is already uploaded," Poppy confirmed, "but they're calling in muscle. Lots of it." I looked at my chips. Nearly 2 million in winnings. No time to cash out. "Create a distraction," I told Dean. "Something big." He nodded and disappeared. 30 seconds later, the fire alarm blared. Sprinklers activated, sending the well-dressed crowd into chaos. I slipped away from the table, heading for the service elevator. A hand grabbed my arm. "Leaving so soon?" Price's voice was ice cold. "We haven't finished our game." "Actually, we have." I nodded toward the windows, where police lights were already flashing. "Check your phone." He pulled it out, face darkening as he read. Every major news outlet was running the story. Live footage from my necklace camera, financial records, everything. "You've made a serious mistake," he growled, grip tightening. "The mistake was threatening my father years ago," I replied. "Yeah, I know about that too. Found his old journals. You tried to force him into your operation. He refused. And died a nobody. He died clean, which is more than you'll be able to say." The elevator dinged. Armed officers poured out, led by Detective Santos. "Thomas Price," she announced. "You're under arrest." Price shoved me hard, making a break for the fire escape. He might have made it if Dean hadn't chosen that moment to emerge from the kitchen, armed with a serving tray. One well-timed swing, and Price went down hard. "Nice hit," I said, helping Dean up. "Baseball scholarship," he grinned. "Finally came in handy." Outside, Poppy was waiting in her van, surrounded by news vans and police cars. "Got everything," she confirmed, "including Price's confession about your dad." I watched as Price was led out in handcuffs, followed by the judge and city officials. The real estate developer had apparently tried to escape through the kitchen and ended up face first in a pot of soup. "You okay?" Detective Santos asked, joining us. I touched my father's ring. thinking about his journals, about the pressure Price had put on him, about the integrity that had probably cost him his life. "Yeah," I said, "but it's not over. There are always more games," she agreed. "No," I pulled out my father's deck. "There are always more players who need to be stopped." The cards felt warm in my hands, like they were ready for whatever came next. So was I. The courthouse buzzed with tension. I sat in the front row, watching Price and Russell share the defense table, while Andre testified against them. My soon-to-be ex-husband looked small in his orange jumpsuit, but his voice carried clearly as he detailed years of extortion and violence. "And what happened when businesses couldn't pay?" the prosecutor asked. "They'd start with threats," Andre said. "Then accidents, fires, break-ins. Sometimes people disappeared." Price's lawyer stood. "Objection, speculation. Overruled," the judge replied. "Continue, Mr. Burton." A commotion erupted at the courtroom doors. 3 men in suits burst in, making a beeline for Andre. Detective Santos moved first, tackling one while courthouse security grabbed another. The third reached into his jacket. "Gun!" someone shouted. I reacted without thinking, grabbing the heavy law book from the bench in front of me and hurling it. It caught the gunman in the face just as Poppy, sitting behind him, swept his legs. He went down hard, weapon skittering across the floor. "Order!" The judge's gavel crashed down. "Clear the courtroom." As security dragged the would-be assassins away, I caught Price smirking. He thought this was a victory, showing what happened to people who testified against him, even if the attempt failed. "Court will resume tomorrow," the judge announced. "Mr. Burton will be placed in protective custody." Outside, Detective Santos pulled me aside. "That wasn't random. Someone leaked the testimony schedule." "I know," I said. "And I know who." I showed her my phone, a series of texts Poppy had intercepted between Price's lawyer and someone called the director. "There's another level," I explained. "Someone above Price, someone with enough power to infiltrate the courthouse." "You need to let us handle this," Santos warned. "You've done enough." "Have I?" I nodded toward the TV in the courthouse lobby, where news crews were reporting on the assassination attempt. "They're still hurting people, still running games, just more carefully now." "Yolanda." "I found something in my father's journals." I cut her off. "Notes about a private club in the mountains, ultra-exclusive. He wrote that the real power players, the ones who controlled everything, they only played there." "The Summit Club," Dean said, joining us. "I heard whispers about it when I worked for Russell. Once a year, the biggest game in the country. Invitation only." "And?" Santos asked. "And this year's game is next week." I pulled out an envelope. Price's lawyer had this in his briefcase. Poppy copied it before the trial. Inside was an ornate invitation and a key card. "Absolutely not," Santos said. "This is way too dangerous." "More dangerous than letting them continue," I challenged. "They tried to kill Andre in open court. What happens to the next person who stands up to them?" "She's right," Poppy chimed in, laptop open. "I've been tracking their pattern. Every time we shut down one operation, 2 more pop up, like a hydra." "Then you cut off the head," Dean said quietly. We all looked at him. "The Summit Club," he continued. "It's not just about poker. It's where they make the real decisions. Territory, operations, who lives, who dies. And now we have a way in," I added. Santos ran a hand through her hair. "Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't authorize an operation based on a stolen invitation. The evidence would be inadmissible." "Who said anything about evidence?" I smiled. "We're just going to play poker." "With what money?" Santos demanded. "These games run in the millions." "Actually," Poppy turned her laptop around. "Remember Price's private accounts? The ones we found during the raid? They're still active, and I know how to access them." "That's illegal," Santos pointed out, "using a criminal's own money to bring down his organization." I shrugged. "Sounds like karma, to me." A court officer approached. "Detective, they need you for the incident report." Santos gave me a hard look. We'll discuss this later. After she left, Dean leaned in. You're really going to do this? No, I corrected. We're going to do this. One last game. The biggest one yet, Poppy added. I touched my father's ring, remembering his last entry in the journal. Sometimes the hardest part isn't playing the cards you're dealt. It's knowing when to deal a new hand entirely. The Summit Club is in 3 days, I said. Poppy, I need everything. Blueprints, security details, player profiles. Dean, you're my inside man again, and I need to make a call. To who? Dean asked. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized from my father's journal. It rang twice. Hello? A gruff voice answered. Jack, this is Sylvester's daughter. I need to ask you about dealing at the Summit Club. There was a long pause. I wondered when you'd call. Your father said you would, someday. I looked at my friends, at the courtroom where Andre had finally found his courage, at the future we were about to reshape. Let's talk, I said. The Summit Club lived up to its name. A glass and steel fortress perched on a mountain peak, accessible only by private road. Jack, my father's old friend, met us at the service entrance. Your father would be proud, he said, adjusting my dealer's bow tie, and terrified. That's what everyone keeps saying. I checked my reflection. The uniform fit perfectly, making me look like just another high-end casino employee. Remember, Jack said, these people aren't just rich, they're dangerous. One wrong move. I know. I touched my father's ring, now serving as my only good luck charm. Is everything set? He nodded. You're dealing the main event, just like we practiced. In my ear, Poppy's voice crackled. Security systems are looped. Dean's in position at the bar. Detective Santos has units standing by. I took a deep breath and entered the main floor. The Summit Club made Price's operation look like a kid's poker night. Billion-dollar deals were being made at the bar. International criminals mingled with corrupt politicians. And at the center of it all, the high-stakes table where I'd be dealing. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack announced to the gathered players, our main event begins in 5 minutes, 10 million minimum buy-in. I took my position, shuffling cards with the precision my father had drilled into me since childhood. One by one, the players arrived. A tech billionaire, a drug kingpin, a senator, and finally, him, the director, the man whose name appeared in every encrypted message, every secret document we'd uncovered. The game is no limit Texas Hold'em, I announced, keeping my voice steady. Good luck. The first few hands went smoothly. I dealt with mechanical precision, watching as millions changed hands. Through my earpiece, I could hear Poppy recording everything, Dean collecting conversations at the bar. Then the director won a massive pot with a bluff. Impressive, the tech billionaire said, almost as impressive as your handling of the Price situation. Price got sloppy, the director replied, letting that dealer's daughter dismantle his operation. Amateur hour. My hands didn't falter as I dealt the next hand, but my heart raced. Speaking of Price, the senator leaned in. What's the status of our witness problem? Being handled, the director smiled. By now, Mr. Burton should be experiencing an unfortunate accident in protective custody. The cards slipped from my hands, scattering across the table. I'm so sorry, I said, reaching to gather them. But the director caught my wrist. You know, he said quietly, you have your father's tells. Everything happened at once. The director reached inside his jacket. Dean shouted a warning from the bar, and I made my play. Now, I yelled. The lights cut out. In the darkness, I flipped the table, sending chips and cards flying. Shouts and chaos erupted as federal agents stormed in from every entrance. Federal agents! Detective Santos's voice boomed. Everyone on the ground. The director tried to run, but found Jack blocking his path. One solid punch from my father's old friend, and the director went down. When the lights came back on, the scene was almost beautiful. Dozens of the world's most untouchable criminals, face down on custom carpets, while agents cuffed them. You okay? Dean asked, helping me up. Andre? I had to know. Safe. Poppy confirmed through the earpiece. The attempt failed. Santos's team intercepted them. The director glared at me as agents led him away. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I do. I pulled out my father's deck of cards. I finished what my father started. He knew about this place, about all of you. He kept records, built evidence, waited for the right moment. And what? The director laughed. You're his revenge. No, I dealt one final hand. 4 aces, face up. I'm his justice. Outside, sunrise painted the mountain gold. Detective Santos handed me a coffee as we watched the parade of arrests, the evidence Poppy gathered, plus the recorded conversations. She shook her head. This will take down operations in 12 countries. Good. I shuffled my father's cards one last time, then handed them to her. Evidence locker, along with his journals. What will you do now? I looked at Dean and Poppy, who were already arguing about their next project. Thought about the message Andre had sent through his lawyer. Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like. I think, I said, I'll deal a new hand. Santos smiled. Your father really would be proud. I know. I touched his ring one last time, then turned toward the sunrise. But more importantly, I am. Behind us, the Summit Club stood empty, its tables silent, its secrets exposed to the dawn. Sometimes, I realized, the best revenge isn't winning the game, it's changing the rules entirely.